given a name to my pain. The Batman.
Always waiting for some Batman to save you.
It's simple. We kill
The Bat of Gotham.
You don't really think you'll win, do you?
I'm Batman.
Hello and welcome to episode 152 of the Batman on Film podcast. BOF is the sponsor as well as a proud member of the Batman Podcast Network. Check out all the shows over at batmanpodcastnetwork.com and follow our Twitter at BatPodNetwork. If you're listening to us on iTunes, if you take the time to rate and review the show, we'll read it on the air. Batman on Film is also now on Patreon if you like what we do here at BOF, whether it's the podcasts, vlogs, or the website itself, and you want to help support us. If you're so inclined, head over to patreon.com/BatmanOnFilm and sign up. I am the host of the BOF podcast, Ryan Haas, and on tonight's show, we are going to continue our celebration of the 10-year anniversary of the original Batman Arkham Asylum video game with part 2 of our roundtable discussion about nearly all of the games in the franchise, which is now known as the Arkhamverse. If you're just now joining us in the previous show, episode 151, me and my BOF brothers Ryan Lauer, Garret Grev, and Chris Clow set the stage for Batman in video games prior to the release of the original Batman Arkham Asylum video game. And now, here is our continued discussion covering the franchise. I would not take it as a given that everybody listening to the show has played any or all of these. So, there are spoilers bound to come up. If you haven't played them by now, you might not be looking at you, Rick Shu. I think
it's been a decade almost. It
has been. But I kind of will give little brief story synopses of these as we go through, just to kind of get everybody on the same page. So I'm just ripping these straight from the wiki fandom thing. So the brief story for Arkham Asylum is that the game focuses on Batman returning Joker to Arkham Asylum after arresting him in Gotham City. After returning the Clown Prince of Crime to the asylum, chaos is unleashed when he breaks out and takes control. It is now up to Batman to stop him and his other foes, including Bane, Harley Quinn, and Poison Ivy. So, there you go.
The thing that I remember a lot from some of the marketing materials, two things stick out at me predominantly. One is the description that this is the longest night of Batman's life. And for some reason, the characterization of the story, putting it in those terms, really made me excited for it.
Each game kind of gets a little one-sentence tagline, kind of.
Yeah.
At least the main three do.
Kind of does, yeah. But then the second thing was the phrase invisible predator. Because I think I'd mentioned before, Batman Begins, the game kind of touched on the idea of stalking from the shadows and scaring the villains. But, I must have played that demo for like 20 hours total. I just played it so much because it really did a good job of serving as this just sample, this foretaste of the feast to come that you get from the combat, from the stealth, from sneaking up behind people and knocking them out when other enemies have no idea what's going on behind them. And that midnight launch, when I picked the game up, I don't know if I went to bed until like maybe 7 o'clock the next morning.
You just played the crap out of it. Here's my question to everybody. And this is, it might be something that only I care about, but for most of these games, we can't just talk about the game. We got to talk about the platforms we played it on and what edition and version we got. Because for this first one, for Arkham Asylum, we all four of us love games. I'm a big gamer. It's what I do for a living. So I always try to get all of the main consoles so I can play everything or play the things that, are popular and stuff so I can keep up with it. But for Arkham Asylum, I might have made the poor choice of, I guess it was a choice. Either weren't. So I got it for the Xbox 360, but I did get the the crazy like Batarang edition that came in this giant like Batarang box, and it had like a Batarang in it, a big old plastic Batarang.
Do you still have it?
But I do still have it. Yes.
Yep, so do I.
But I got it for the 360. The thing that might have been poor choice is that most games at the time, multi-platform releases, the 360 kind of seemed to have some of the edge here and there. Every game's different, of course, but I think I pre-ordered it before all the extra stuff got announced for the PS3, which was kind of a bummer.
Oh yeah, it was a huge bummer for me because that was the edition I got and that was the platform I got it on. And I alluded to it off mic, but I went to San Diego Comic-Con in 2009 and they had demos for Arkham Asylum on the show floor at the DC booth, and I kind of gave the person attending the demo an earful about, why are you guys doing this exclusive crap? You shouldn't be doing that. What the hell? Come on, I want to play the Joker. And he's like, yeah, Sony gave us a bunch of money, and that didn't really make me feel any better. So it was kind of a bummer. But, I mean, the cool thing, I think that was really like the first new collector's edition of a game I got, because, yeah, the Batarang wasn't all that impressive, but it had that journal in it that provided some additional lore aspects, like in the form of Dr. Young's, her patient notes. Her guesses about who Batman was and what was driving some of the more high-profile villains, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. And then there was the behind-the-scenes stuff that came in with the game case. So I thought it was cool. And then they had the extra endurance combat mission with the Scarecrow as a pre-order bonus at GameStop, and I got all that stuff. And the experience of playing, I've played it on the PS3 since then, and it's fine. I think it runs a little bit better on the 360, but the 360, for my hands anyway, just have a huge advantage on that controller. That controller feels much better to play a game like that on. The PS3 was the fact that the PS3 version had extra content one of the reasons that led you to play the games multiple times on multiple consoles, or would you have done that anyway? I probably would have done it anyway, but that was certainly a factor because, I had a 360 and a Wii. I didn't have a PS3 at the time that Arkham Asylum came out, so I didn't really have a choice, but I was fine with that because the 360 I thought was a great platform. But yeah, later on, I was always curious about the Joker stuff, and the Joker stuff is cool, but now that I have played it abundantly on both the PS3 and in the Return to Arkham collection, I don't know if that's necessarily something that would have been a complete game changer if I had the chance to choose between the PS3 and 360 versions. If that makes sense. Is that Joker stuff only on the PlayStation 4 version of the Return to Arkham collection? No, it's on the Xbox One. It's on as well. Both. Oh, it didn't make it to Xbox until the Return to Arkham collection. Wow, yeah. There you go. Yeah. But, look, the experience of playing that game for the first time, the full game, it's hard for me to put into words because, to me, this is, for my money, a transcendental Batman experience. There are two primary transcendental Batman experiences that I've had in my life. The first one was when I was 4 years old at Six Flags Magic Mountain, and I saw Batman in the flesh at the Batman stunt show for the first time. It was like a shamanic moment. And the second one was playing Arkham Asylum. Watching the movies and seeing The Dark Knight in the theater for the first time, it's an amazing, amazing, indescribable experience. The thing that the Arkham games have that nothing else really does, even compared with other video games, is the truthfulness combined with the interactivity. And that's why, I think I've told you this, Ryan, but the Arkham version of Batman, especially by the time City came out, is my favorite non-comics version of Batman, compared with every single adaptation, because not only are the stories phenomenal, but it's the interactive element and the truthfulness to the experience of being Batman. You guys talked about it before, but I mean, that quote from Descartes, you know how to engage 6 men. We can teach you how to engage 600. In this game, you feel like that's possible. You do it on a regular basis. Previous superhero experiences that were considered good before the dawn of the Arkham franchise never got close to the kind of power you feel like you wield in these games. And it's not just the punches and the kicks and the somersaults, but being that unmatched agent in matters of stealth, and the fact that the story also pushes forward the detective element makes this a definitive Batman experience no matter when you play it. And that's why I would encourage anybody that hasn't played this game yet, just go out and do it. Even if you know all of the surprises that the story has in store, which is quite a lot, especially the first time you play it, Arkham Asylum is that rare kind of Batman experience that allows you to experience the story in perhaps a more immersive way than you ever had the chance to experience before at this level of definitive truthfulness. So I can't say enough high words about this game, basically. I'm running out of, my vocabulary is running dry, gentlemen.
We're only on the first game.
I know.
Even. Well, I think that's, the interesting thing is that when a popular tactic for making licensed video games is usually, and this is usually due because of time and budget and, and the number of platforms they have to ship these games on, is they can take pre-existing game genre and kind of tack on the franchise to it, like you look at the Green Lantern game that came out based on the Green Lantern movie. They took God of War and they're like, okay, let's take that, how that game works, and turn that into Green Lantern. I think what they did for Arkham Asylum that was so smart, and of course they had the resources to do it and more time and all that stuff, but what they did was they, instead of taking a pre-existing game and building Batman onto it, I think they asked themselves, what can Batman do? And then they built game mechanics around that. And I think that made all the difference in the world. Just like Chris was saying, like and like Garrett was saying, for me, it wasn't the first game to make me feel like Batman, but it was absolutely the first game that made me feel like Batman effortlessly. Because when you combine the fighting with the detective stuff, with the story stuff, with the traversal, with the gadgets, it was all there, and it just combines into this effortless, story and interactive experience.
And again, I mean, the stealth aspect had never been developed to this level before. And then, of course, I think one of the coolest innovations, just to the idea of being Batman, is detective mode. Because, and I know that there are some people who play the whole thing in detective mode, and that's fine. You can do whatever works for you. You'll miss out on some pretty beautiful production design if you do that, but still, I mean, it's effective. But it also kind of helps to give sort of a practical application to the ways that Batman can appear omnipresent in things like the comics. Like, how does he see behind the walls? How does he punch through the wall and always get his fingers around your throat?
It lets you in on how to be Batman.
Yeah, it does. But, and then there's the introduction of the cryptographic sequencer, and the explosive gel is a really popular one. I mean, my computer background right now is Batman just about to punch Titan Joker with the gel on his fist. Such a cool moment. But, I mean, it's just the tip of the iceberg, though. All of that stuff, reading any comic book or watching any movie will easily show you that when Batman gets in fights with his most dangerous enemies, they're not typically just exclusively one-on-one fist fights. And that's part of the thing that makes Arkham Asylum rather genius as far as Batman exploitation is concerned. It forces you to adapt your tactics based on which enemies you fight. You don't fight Bane the same way that you fight Poison Ivy. And the fact that it was able to create game mechanics, like you said before, Ryan, that emphasizes the resourcefulness and the full repertoire of Batman's abilities and his tactical skill. I mean, you go to Bane, you go to Ivy, but then it's like, holy hell, how are you supposed to take down Killer Croc And the answer is, well, you don't. You contain him. You know, what's the advantage that Batman has over Croc? He's slower, he's not as strong, but he's smarter. And that's fully on display in your direct encounter with Croc in this game. But then there are some bosses that are a bit more nuanced and
like the Scarecrow. Like
exactly.
That's yeah.
One of you guys mentioned the Scarecrow before. And I mean, Scarecrow, for my money, is one of Batman's most dangerous enemies. But these are some of the best orchestrated events in modern gaming history. 3 separate instances where you encounter the Scarecrow, and the fear toxin that he infects Batman with augments the environment of the game and puts you in this kind of supernatural kind of world. I think, Garrett, did you mention the supernatural aspect? Or maybe it was Ryan?
No,
it was Garrett.
But having the one foot in the world of that sort of grim, gritty, boots on the ground, kicks to the face, but then you see the world explode before your eyes as you're being mocked and taunted by the corpses of your dead parents. That is a Scarecrow experience, you know, and not only are the Scarecrow experiences really cool and fun, and they help vary the gameplay in a few key instances. I think it's kind of in the transition between the acts of the story that the Scarecrow encounters take place. But, I mean, all of a sudden,
the that whole sequence shocked me to death. It was almost like people that were big into GameCube games back in the day. If anybody ever played Eternal Darkness, it was It was like taking something that you would see in a game like Eternal Darkness and putting it into a Batman game while you're playing it, and it's still mind-blowing.
Even the glitching out of the console, right?
Mm-hmm.
It does a fake-out glitch.
Yeah,
and the
that's
TV
what I was just going to
statics.
say was, like, clearly I wasn't the only person who was like, what the hell? What's going on?
No, I was like, oh, crap. Oh, no. What's happened? My console's dead.
Exactly. And even in the instance where Joker shoots you in the face and it says, nope, you should have twisted your stick. And no, you couldn't. You couldn't do that. Because you're like, oh, okay, I got to go back and try and twist the stick to dodge the bullet. And that just doesn't work. Yeah.
You got me.
But, I mean, these are incredible bookended segments that also change the game into a platformer, into like a stealth platformer. And I mean, it's just amazing to me that you can go from this really combat-driven third-person action game and then effectively turn it into creepy Batman Mario for just a few minutes of the total experience overall.
Well, and also mix in the detective world exploring free play of all the Riddler trophies and riddles and stuff too.
Yeah.
Gosh, what a and that's its own little thing too, to like extend gameplay. It's Arkham Asylum is like this really like well done blend of narrative and gameplay that just it pleases everybody. You know, like there's something in it for fans and gamers, and if you happen to be a fan of Batman and a gamer, then the game, I mean, no wonder it blew up the way it did. But I mean, the way that the Arkham Asylum ended for me was like, oh my, like what? It was crazy. The way that it ended was just insane, and it made me immediately be like, okay, well, when's the next one coming out?
Yeah,
they have to make a sequel, right? They can't just leave this. And I was there hadn't been a great track record of direct sequels to Batman games at that point.
Well, and the environments are also varied too. Like I don't know if I encountered a game that helped make the environments feel so uniquely different from each other since like Super Metroid, because you're in the mansion, which is totally different from the way that the botanical gardens look, which is not nearly as creepy as the bowels of the intensive treatment ward. But then it gets even creepier when you start walking into the penitentiary, and you're just grossed out when you get into the sanitarium and the medical facility. I mean, every single environment is so impeccably well designed. And even with little cues that kind of remind you of Dave McKeon's work on the Arkham Asylum book from '89 with Grant Morrison, the confluence of every factor coming into this core, really definitive Batman experience, that was what helped to elevate Arkham Asylum into this. It wasn't just a Batman game that came out. Like, before Arkham Asylum came out, and again, my buddy Chris Baker said, yeah, before it was just that Batman game that IDOS was putting out. But then when it comes out, everything combines and funnels into one of the purest Batman experiences that by that point we really just needed. You know, we had gotten arguably the definitive Batman movie. The animated series had been around for almost 20 years by that point, but we hadn't gotten that game, and the game managed to take the best from things like the animated series and those movies and put it into something that was just completely evocative of arguably fiction's greatest character.
I thought its timing too was such a great 1-2 punch of like universal praise for Batman. To follow up The Dark Knight with a Batman game as well done as this one was, like, I don't know what else I could have asked for other than just more of it.
Yeah, it was crazy that just a few short years before we were like, the last Batman movie was Batman and Robin, and everybody hates Dark Tomorrow, and then all of a sudden a few years later we had Batman Begins and The Dark Knight and Batman Arkham Asylum. So it immediately made me want to let's just go ahead and jump into the next game. So it made me want the next game right away, and 2 years to wait for a game is not that much time.
Real quick,
at all.
No.
Did any of you guys, as soon as playing, find the hints to Arkham City when you played Arkham Asylum the first time?
No.
Okay.
I don't think
But they're
anybody
there.
did. Yeah, the fact that they're there is incredible. But what was it? Was it like, it was just a few months, I think, before Arkham City came out.
According to Wikipedia, I looked up and it said that it was like 6 months before they'd already known like we're doing a sequel, but it wasn't until after it released that they started to let it leak to gamers of like, hey, check out yada yada here, and that's when people were able to discover the plans in, I think it was in Sharp's office.
Yeah, it's in Sharp. So I mean, I can get there right now just from memory. It's the left-hand wall when you just start walking into Sharp's office, and the only way that you can blast through that wall is if you have 3 very precisely placed instances of explosive gel, and you detonate them all simultaneously. Then the wall will come open, and it will not come open unless you detonate all 3 in the right spots.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
That's so cool. I mean, it's such an awesome way to put in an Easter egg. And yeah, that lingered for a long time before people got to actually see. And thankfully, if you play that, because in the original version of the game, the textures on the maps and everything of what will become Arkham City are a little bit blurry. But if you play Arkham Asylum in the Return to Arkham collection,
did they update it?
The textures are crystal clear. And you can see
amazing.
everything really, really well. And it's such a cool way to hint at what's coming next. And the fact that it was there when the game shipped is pretty awesome.
Yeah. So like we only had to wait 2 years, which is pretty insane to me that we only had to wait 2 years for Arkham City to come out. And it was released in 2011 for the Xbox 360, PS3, and the PC. And the really quick story is that it follows Batman in a sectioned off part of Gotham City called Arkham City, intended to house the most dangerous criminals, including Joker, Harley Quinn, Hugo Strange, Ra's al Ghul, and Poison Ivy. Like for me, this was the one where I think I was trying to stick with the 360, and then I pre-ordered the crazy version that had like the almost black and white-esque statue with it.
Yep.
That came with it, and I got to GameStop and they had like quote not gotten enough of the copies of the 360 in, but they did have the PS3 version, and I was like, okay, I'll get the PS3 version. So I got the PS3 version, and that ended up leading me down the road of just getting the PlayStation version for everything going forward. But yeah, so it was crazy that they were able to get this game out as fast as they did, and I think it's a lot of people's favorite one. After Arkham Asylum, it was like, okay, well, if they do a sequel, how do they capture this same vibe and use the same gameplay and not set it in something that's Arkham Asylum again? Like, how does that even work? And then you start to ask questions like, well, this makes it, Arkham Asylum, the first game, makes us feel like Batman, but there's some other things that we kind of want to be able to do as Batman, like drive the Batmobile, or which we didn't get until later, or where's more of Gotham City? We want to play inside of the city, and Arkham City like started to give us some of those things, and not just here's the city. It was like really tied into the story and in a really interesting way.
Well, instantly for me, when that first one was done, it's like everything that I loved about Asylum, it was just like there's so many villains they haven't used, plus we're not in Gotham City, so that'll be awesome.
Right.
And so when they released the title of Arkham City, I was kind of like, well, what the hell does that mean? And then
because that's when you're like, oh, they're naming each game has the word Arkham in it. Okay,
yeah, that's all I had. I was just like, those were just the two things that I pinged off of, like, hopefully more villains, hopefully we're in Gotham City, and then like you'd said, of like maybe a Batmobile or something like that.
Well, Garrett, you had to be on the hype train for this one after kind of not being on the, but then going full bore once you got your hands on Arkham Asylum.
Yeah, tell us where you were and don't lie this time.
Yeah. I'll try to keep my ears right. No, I was so on board with this. I couldn't wait. Tracked, the development, bought it as soon as I possibly could, and it's funny because looking back on it and trying to think about, I don't want to give away any details if we do a last minute ranking thing. I don't know if it ranks as high for me today as it did when I got it, but everything about what I really enjoyed in Arkham Asylum, I think from a gameplay standpoint, they improved upon, which was just mind blowing to me. So it was sort of like, I just want more of this, this thing that I loved. I don't expect you to be able to do any better. And from a gameplay standpoint, I think they did do better. And I was just, blown away by it. So it was another thing where, I think I sort of beat all the side challenges in Arkham Asylum over a somewhat reasonable amount of time. Like I didn't, skip class or, miss meals or anything. But with Arkham City, it was like, okay, I cannot stop playing. This is borderline compulsive. It wasn't borderline. It was compulsive. I'll just be honest.
Well, who could blame you though? I mean, we are talking about Arkham City, and so this is October 2011. In fact, I think October 18th, 2011. I had an exam that day. I didn't give a damn. I didn't give a damn.
It's called how long does it take you to beat Arkham City?
Yeah, how long does it take me to get face to face with the Joker for the first time? That's what the exam is. But throughout this whole time, I work at a comic book store. I'm a retailer, and we actually engage in a partnership with a local game store in the area, Reset Games, which is still there, and so is my former comic shop in Bellingham, Washington, the Comics Place. So the Comics Place and Reset Games, we engage in a partnership. The New 52 had just launched a month earlier.
Oh, man.
So we actually ordered excess copies of Batman #1 in anticipation for the midnight launch of Arkham City, because Reset ended up buying copies of Batman #1 from us so that people who pre-ordered the game with them got a copy of Batman #1 from the New 52, which was a pretty cool deal. And it was a way for them to stand out a little bit because they didn't have like the Robin missions that GameStop could offer and, local game store and everything. So it was a mutually beneficial deal. And me and our store manager, Roman, still one of my best friends from the area, we put together some Batman trivia questions. And they get kind of difficult, if I remember correctly, because Roman is like a comic book historian going back to the Golden Age. He's got a really, really intense set of knowledge, puts me to shame. And so we came up with these trivia questions and a couple of little prize packs and everything. And I was also writing reviews for Reset Games on the side, and they were compensating me by giving me the games that I would review. And Arkham City was one of them. And
Pretty
I got
good deal.
Oh yeah, it was a great deal. I wish I still had it.
No kidding.
But so I got the collector's edition of the game, and so they covered like the base cost, and I paid the difference, which was like $40. And yeah, I had a political science exam at school the next day, and I still just stayed up all night. In fact, my now wife was with me when I brought the game home, and I started playing it, and she's just like, "How is it?" And I remember just being in awe of doing the first glide off the Ace Chemicals building toward the courthouse, and just going, awesome.
And so by that time, I had seen, like, I think you could see, I think on YouTube or whatever, that's when they started to do the whole, like, we played the first 15 minutes or something, so I knew everything that happened, or there were some previews or something that Game Informer or somebody did, like, previews, so I knew, like, you go into the courthouse, there's Two-Face, there's all this stuff that happens, but it didn't matter. Like, once you get the controller in your hands and start playing it, just the way the game opens with Hugo Strange, and oh my god, you're playing as Bruce Wayne, and it sets up, it's almost like a TV series, like a season of a TV series, where it like gives you what the status quo is, and here's the time and the place, and here's the situation, and then you have to like suit up as Batman. Like, it was such a cool opening.
Really efficient exposition, and I was actually reviewing the Arkham City comic book series that was coming out for BOF in the months before the game came out. And Paul Dini retweeted us on one of the reviews, which was such an awesome moment. But I really loved how he was able to lay the groundwork, because he worked with Carlos D'Anda, who is one of the concept artists for Arkham Asylum and Arkham City. And he was the artist for the comic book series. It was a 5-issue series that ended the same month that the game came out. And it did a really good job of sort of filling in the gap of what the situation was that led to the creation of Arkham City. But again, and Ryan, you just alluded to it, when you get the controller in your hand and you start to actually control Batman and see how this game feels in direct comparison with its predecessor. Because we were all playing Arkham Asylum the day before Arkham City came out. Yeah. And it's amazing to me, and it still amazes me to this day, how there were so few criticisms directed at the way that Arkham Asylum controlled, and yet Arkham City still feels that much better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, I almost forgot. Like, you don't even start as Bruce Wayne. You start as Catwoman. Like, what?
Yeah, that's true. And I just
love that was a huge thing.
I love how when you get into that first fight with Penguin's thugs and you bust through your chains, and there's the guy off in the distance like, how'd he do that? And it's like, we know how he did that. He's Batman. That's how he did that.
Yeah, but that, that's exactly, it kind of sums up my thoughts is, Haas to put it more particularly around the gameplay. Like, no one ever complained about Arkham Asylum. These developers could have sat back and said, let's do the same thing. We'll get a new story. But we
let's
don't
Majora's Mask this. Basically.
Yeah. If it's not broken, don't fix it. And they managed to fix something that in no way was broken. It's really, and I think the combos is one of the, gliding obviously is, sort of this new additional piece, but the subtle tweaks they made to the combo gameplay and, the what's that called? Battle mode, combat mode. What is it? But the way you can string together the combos and incorporate more of the gadgets, like, it was genius. And it was this thing that, you almost you didn't miss it in Arkham Asylum as you were playing it. But now if I go back and play Arkham Asylum, it's sort of like this missing limb syndrome. Well, I can feel something that I can't do because it just has become, that sort of part of the combo gameplay became, a core element, but you didn't even know that you were missing it, with the first game. It really speaks volumes to how great both of them were.
I remember that year I spent my Halloween sitting in my room playing Arkham City for 10 hours. Skipped any kind of Halloween fun because I just didn't care. For me, my fun was Arkham City. Didn't beat it, but it didn't matter. It was the best Halloween I've ever had.
Oh yeah, I mean, just jump on like a stream or something and just play. Let's see how far we can get. I mean, why not? Because you're gonna have a good time, basically. I mean, there's no real way around that. And I mean, well, so Arkham Asylum, and we touched on it. It was notable for so many reasons, but the thing that made it great was its controls and the abilities that you could just immediately tap into, and the combat felt great. And now, you go back and play Arkham Asylum and it feels naturally a little bit limited because we've gotten used to the template that Arkham City introduced. Adding into the beatdowns, I think, is a big element of what makes the combat in Arkham City feel just that much better. And quickfire gadgets, I mean, we had quickfire on the Batarang, but now your repertoire is opened up so much more considerably in Arkham City. And the ability to steal weapons from people and destroy them in the middle of a fight. That my older brother is not someone who will drop his jaw very often. But when I grabbed a baseball bat from a thug and broke it over my knee in the middle of a fight,
it's just
even he got impressed. And they even make the little wood chips fly out when you do it.
The details are all there.
They're all there.
Is Arkham City the first game that has like you can see the Riddler informants in detective mode?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So that was one of the things that like blew me away.
Yeah,
yeah. You don't even have to be in detective mode once they're established that they're on the map. Yeah.
So you're fighting guys, and then one like gets like a green highlight, and you're like, oh, that's a guy that works for the Riddler, and so you can just interrogate people on the fly.
Well, also don't knock him out.
Yeah,
you gotta be careful.
Yeah, you have to be careful, and it's like
take him out. It's got to be last.
Exactly, and it's such a like. It's a very Batman themed, but it's tied into the gameplay. It's like a perfect marriage of those two things, and just being able to do it just dynamically. You can be swinging around the city, completing a mission, but then, you see some thugs on the ground. I'm going to go beat those guys up. Oh, one's a Riddler, like, informant and stuff. And it just feels like totally like something that you would do if you were Batman on patrol.
And playing it was fun because, like, at least for me, when you get into those fight scenes and the combo meter would start racking up, and you wanted to do anything you can to not break that and get the highest score possible and be able to do all of the moves that you want to do. And then I'd sort of get into the zone and then realize the dude I'm going to try to take out next is glowing green and have to hit, I think it was like circle on the PS3 control to like sort of bounce over him to keep your combo going but not hit him or knock him out. It's like just that little extra challenge that makes you think while you're doing something that's very fast paced. It keeps you engaged and keeps the variety of those sort of beat 'em up moments going, where you're not just like, okay, I just do this the same way I did the last one.
Absolutely. And by introducing more heavily armored enemies, you have to change the way that you approach those in order to keep your cadence up if you're interested in actually getting like a combo in the 40s or 50s or even beyond that. And, it's just such a really natural way to take what worked so well in the original game, but just up the ante. And, the feeling of running around as Batman is also really greatly enhanced by how the cape works in this game. Because you can actually glide, and it's a continuous glide. It's more of a fly, practically speaking, but it just feels better, and it allows you to actually traverse a fair amount of distance without the need for a fast travel system. Not that the map or the overworld in Arkham City is that big compared to a lot of other open world games, but the addition of the grapnel boost and the way that breaking into a dive and getting the lifts up, it just feels phenomenally. And all of those gameplay innovations, and it even managed to get a Scarecrow-like segment in with the encounter with Ra's al Ghul.
Right. Yes.
And
that's something that I was going to say too while you were mentioning stuff about similar or more of the same yet different of like with controls and other in battling and stuff like that. I thought the Al Ghul inclusion I thought it was kind of brilliant because it was like, oh, this is like the Scarecrow stuff from the last one, but we're getting a whole new a whole new villain and stuff that really,
Yeah.
wow, this makes sense. This is really cool.
All with
you
the
talk about
trademark backhanded compliments of Ra's al Ghul.
I mean, you talk about like fan favorite stuff. I was, shocked and pleased that they included Azrael in that game.
Yeah.
And he had his own like storyline, own backstory and stuff like that. I was like, whoa, they put Azrael in, and put him through that Arkhamverse filter. It's not just throwing the character in. They always, when they put all these new characters in, they're thinking about, how they fit into the other larger narrative that they're doing for the game. And if Arkham Asylum, if the first game was trying to tell us like, okay, they're doing their own thing with it, Arkham City really puts a nail in that coffin because of the way it ends. And I think that kind of freaked everybody out when it with the way that Arkham City ends.
Well, Ryan, you mentioned the Arkhamverse filter. I think that it was really this game that established what that filter was, because Arkham Asylum, if you squinted your eyes a little bit, it could have taken place in the DC universe pretty easily. Yeah. But it was Arkham City that really showed, and I think probably the character that represents this the most, the sort of establishment of an Arkhamverse filter, is the Penguin.
Absolutely. I mean, 100%. I was in my brain, I'm like, is he going to Penguin? He's got to go to Penguin.
Yeah. I mean, and Nolan North did such a really interesting and effective job of separating the character. And it's like, well, that's not really a Cockney accent. And then you go a little bit deeper and no, it's not. He's he might be faking it, because he's just that much of a slime ball. But and it asks some really interesting questions, like how the hell did he actually get the thing shoved into his eye? And he's got this voice box on his throat. And he's also just such a slimy son of a bitch that you can't wait to kick the living crap out of. You just can't wait until you can get your hands on him.
Yeah, I think
oh, please.
No, I think you're dead on. Stylistically, this is, this, to the earlier point, this is the game that really solidified what that, Arkhamverse style would be. And it's it finds a way to do this where I think a lot of other properties, if they're movies or TV shows, Titans on the streaming app comes to mind. When it's really easy to fail when you try to go kind of grimy and edgy and gritty and a little bit more dirty or dangerous to try to be cool, to get that, oh yeah, this is cool. It kind of can come off as like, this is what we think 13-year-old boys would think is cool, where it just feels cheap or off. And the Arkhamverse managed to kind of go in that direction without any of those repercussions. Like when you see these characters, and Azrael sticks out to me too. It's a dirty, kind of frayed, sewn together, like patchy costume, but it's definitely Azrael. But it's the Arkhamverse Azrael. It's like grim and gritty without being, the grim dark crap that things turned into too often.
But it's still true to the essence of the character,
right? Yeah,
of that version of the character, at least.
True to the essence, and also dangerous, because I think the Penguin represents that on one side of the spectrum. But for me, the thing that represents it as well on the other side of the spectrum that made me like scream in joy, because I'd seen screenshots beforehand, of course, but actually seeing the moment where he shows up for the first time, I'm like, yes! When Robin showed up.
Robin.
Oh my gosh.
Because
that was thrilling. It was so vindication for liking being a Robin fan,
And it made such perfect sense, like that conception of Robin. Not only was it, and I think people were even writing at the time, like, this is a movie-ready version of Robin.
100%.
And it is. It totally is. But it also just reinforces the reason that Robin exists, and particularly the Tim Drake Robin, why he exists, too. And it also, it looks weird, and you're like, well, he's got kind of a scowl, and he's got a really strange haircut compared to other versions of Robin that we've seen. But then when he talks, and when you see the function that he serves in the story, that is Tim Drake. They managed to take things through that Arkhamverse filter, like Ryan said before. But you brought Dini back to write the story. Everything feels truthful if you read the books on a regular basis. It never loses sight of the heart of what it is adapting. And it just feels like a hard-edged, dangerous, but still reverent and truthful Batman story.
It's funny because this comparison won't make a ton of sense, I think, to a lot of people, but with Robin in this game, I think about the changeover from the Jason Todd costume to Tim's costume, where it's like all of a sudden you see something that's tweaked and adjusted, but totally faithful to the thing that came before, and make it feel so much more relatable is the wrong word, but like existing in some semblance of reality. But it's not dismissing in sort of a irreverent way what came before it, but it's building on it and doing a filtered version, to use that term again, in a way that can land and seem more accessible to a modern audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the tone, of course, is one thing, but then you also get back into the gameplay experience. And like Arkham Asylum, Arkham City requires you to adapt to different tactics to defeat different bosses. But still, for my money, and I played a fair amount of video games in my day, but still...
I don't believe you.
I think... I still think that my all-time favorite boss fight is probably Freeze in this game. And
yeah, a lot of people have said that too, and I think part of it is, like, we keep saying this is the blend of narrative, story, and gameplay that this series does, and I think that boss fight is a really good example of that.
Yeah, I mean, I love Freeze anyway. He is one of my favorite Batman villains. I don't know if he is my favorite, but it seems like a lot of people kind of shortchange him, particularly, I guess, because of his reputation being associated with Arnold Schwarzenegger now. But all of us on this panel know the kinds of narrative highs that you can get from a character like Freeze. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, whether you want to talk about stories in the comics or whether you want to go to Heart of Ice in the animated series and Michael Ansara's incredible performance. And it's a shame that Michael Ansara probably wasn't in any shape to reprise his role as Freeze at this point in time. But Maurice LaMarche does a pretty respectable job as Freeze in Arkham City and later in Arkham Origins and even in Arkham Knight. And, the implementation of using a character like Freeze also goes back to something I think that Ryan said earlier about, one foot in reality and another foot in fantasy. And Freeze is kind of a I guess, embodiment of that concept, even in Batman's world, because it's science that both afflicts him and allows him to keep living. And seeing that kind of power represented in Freeze, and also trying to emphasize that he's a smart guy and you can't fight him the same way every time you do encounter him, is just such a great way not only to tell a story through a fight, but also to adapt a character who got the short end of the stick in live action before. And now, you're seeing the full potential of the threat that he presents to Batman, but also just how cool a character he really is. So, I mean, I can't say enough good things about the Freeze boss fight. I love that moment.
He was definitely run through the Arkham filter, but they kept his inclusion fit the overall story. But also, he was focused on his task at hand, which is very true to the character. He wasn't on top of the building saying I'm gonna freeze all of Gotham and blah, blah, blah. It's he had a mission. He had a one-way.
He's just supposed to be left alone to do his thing.
Yeah, which is so true, and that's the best. For me, that's the best version of Mr. Freeze that I read. It's he doesn't really care. It's Batman, just get out of my way. I'm not here to on a mission to kill you. I need to accomplish this task only. But if you get in my way, then I'll kill you. But get out of and I felt like that was just their interpretation for that, which also, it was it's a cool, tense, kind of mission, because you're definitely sneaking around, and it's about specific strikes on him, and stuff like that, specific maneuvering and everything. But I mean, I agree. It's a great level.
That will not work again. Yeah, I love that moment.
Yeah.
And it's just a pure Batman moment, too, because it forces him to find different tactics and different ways to take him down. But then, I mean, Freeze and Raish, it's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, you got Two-Face, Penguin, Grundy, Harley shows up in this.
Clayface.
Clayface.
The one of the final bosses in the game.
Yeah.
They really did a number on Clayface. Like, just tech wise too, like all the stuff that they did to like sell that character was amazing.
It was.
And the end sequence and playing in the Monarch Theater and playing like with him and like the acting and like in the theater and him with the Joker and stuff like that. I thought it was just what a capper where you, granted by the game's initial teaser trailer for it and showing the Joker, but then it just like seemed everything after that was Hugo Strange is the villain. So you accomplish defeating Strange and then you're like, oh no, there's still a lot left. And then in comes the Joker, which is always perfect for a Joker story. But it's not like it's just straight up, oh, fight the Joker. It's like there's, oh, here's a surprise, here's a surprise. It felt very thematic. I thought that was like very unexpected and a great capper to this game too. It's like, oh, I thought I was done. No, I'm not done.
Well, and that's even before you get to the side missions too.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to see just the beginning of the potential with Zsasz in Arkham Asylum. But then in Arkham City, things get taken to a whole other level with him. You get another reality augmentation when you take on the Mad Hatter briefly, which is just...
that was great too.
Yeah, it's such a cool little encounter. And then you got a murder mystery, and you don't realize it until you see Hush right in front of you, who's responsible for it. And they even worked in Deadshot. They gave the little clue with Deadshot right when you get into the prison for the first time. And then you're trying to stop him from assassinating political prisoners. And then you finally get your foot on the face of the Riddler. And that is still one of the single most satisfying moments I've ever had in a video game.
But like, can we talk about the ending? Because that is what left me in just
yeah.
What? So we're gonna spoil the heck out of these games. So like, the first game, Arkham Asylum, it all centers around this what is it? It's a drug, right? This Titan drug.
Titan. Yeah.
And Joker's making these giant brutes out of it, and really there's an excuse to like include Bane and have bigger, tougher enemies to fight. But at the end of the first game, Joker becomes this Titan Joker, this giant hulking, roided out, beast of a Joker. But they turn that on its head for Arkham City because they're like, okay, well, Joker's got side effects from that, and he's like dying and stuff. And they play some red herring games with you throughout the game, and then you see like Joker, he's back to normal, he's back,
he's
and
impregnating
he's fine,
Harley,
stuff like that. Yes, all these things happen, and but then it turns out that like Joker really is dying, and he's had Clayface do his bidding and look like impersonate him and stuff throughout other different parts of the game. And once you finally defeat Clayface, they end up I think there's like an antidote or something, and then it gets destroyed. And I think Ra's al Ghul was involved in all that stuff too. There was like was Joker wanting to use the Lazarus Pit to revive himself or something?
No, once Batman mentioned immortality, Joker knew that, wow, what Talia's saying is actually true?
Right.
That sounds like a good deal.
Right, but it ends up being too little too late, and they actually kill the Joker in Arkham City, and I was like, what?
Yeah.
But
yeah, so
I wasn't like, yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I just think it's no one saw it coming, right? And we're not used to, real deaths when it comes to most of any of these characters. That we just don't buy it. But it played in a way that's like, oh my gosh, yeah, that happened. But it was also just like pure Batman at the end, Right, he's got the anecdote. The anecdote. He's
anecdote?
telling a funny.
I
he's
missed
telling
that
a funny
part.
one.
One more thing.
Hang on, Joker. Before I got a great one for you, quick. But he is fighting becoming a Titan Batman himself. And the Joker's trying to get him to give into it, and he shoots himself, even knowing that now I'm going to have to go through all of this, just without any sort of additional aid. But this is when the Joker is in this game dying, gives himself the anecdote, and Joker tries to get it from him or steal it from him. It falls and breaks on the floor, and Joker's trying to lap it up, and it's very clear that now he's dying for real. And Batman looks down at him and says, even after everything you've done, I still would have saved you. And it's just like so Batman, right? And and the fact, and it speaks to the character as well. It was just really well written, where you end that game thinking, 100% sure this is the end of the Joker.
I felt that way.
Yeah, I remember
the way that it was just done. It really felt like it was, in knowing that like this is its own universe, its own world, so it's its own rules. I just kind of, something about it felt definitive. And I thought that was cool, as much as like I loved so far what I'd seen with this kind of Joker, but of like this version, he's dead. I'm like, that's, I don't know, it feels right. I was very pleased.
When I first absorbed the ending of the game, I didn't really believe that they had done it. Like, I knew that I'd reached the end of the primary story, but I was reasonably sure that there would be another one and that we would see the Joker again. And little did I know that both scenarios would be correct. But yeah, I mean, the fact that they had first of all, the independence to actually make that decision for this game, but also the fact that the story was going to go there. It ended up leading to, and I know that this is being said with hindsight, but it ended up leading to a really interesting kind of character study that we don't often really get to see in other media outside of the comics, and that is Batman is confronted with something that he views as a failure. And he has to come to terms with the fact that he believes he did not do enough to prevent a death. And, we'll get into Arkham Knight, where there's kind of a double whammy with that kind of concept. But, especially the hint by the time you get to the release of Harley Quinn's Revenge, the story tries to plant doubts in the player's mind at that point about what Batman's mental state is. Because he's kind of even more distant than normal by then. And Robin is trying to reassure Gordon that, no, everything's okay, really. And it's also like he's trying to convince himself of that. And it wasn't until that DLC dropped that I started to understand what the true purpose of the Joker's death was. Because in the moment, yes, it was surprising, it was shocking. But then with a little bit of the fullness of time, well before Arkham Origins came out, and Arkham Knight, obviously, seeing Batman have to confront the loss of the Joker as a personal failure was a really interesting way to frame what their conflict means, what it means to Batman, obviously what it meant to the Joker, but what it means for Batman, because they had a very complicated relationship, and the fact that the games looked like they were trying to explore that on a deeper level. As a Batman fan who's absorbed so much media with this character, that was kind of new territory, particularly outside of the comics, and that's what really excited me about it.
And the series kind of takes a little fork in the road after Arkham City, and that's when we get a couple of games before. That's where Rocksteady goes off and takes 4 years to make the next game from them, and which is Arkham Knight. But before that, we get Arkham Origins and its companion game, Arkham Origins Blackgate. So Arkham Origins ended up coming out 2 years after Arkham City in 2013, and that was developed by WB Montreal. And we'll get it more into this, but the story, the little blip for the story here is the game was a prequel to Batman Arkham Asylum and focuses on Batman being targeted by 8 assassins in Black Mask. And the game is a lot more complicated than that story-wise. And it turned out to be a big pleasant surprise, which I'm sure you guys will get into. But the big selling point for this one was that the other 2 games had been less formulaic on the front in terms of boss fights. We mentioned a couple in here like Killer Croc and Mr. Freeze, but they're not. They subvert what you would typically expect out of a quote boss battle or whatever. So that tried to be that game's claim to fame in terms of one of its new innovations. But I remember at the time people were a little skeptical because it was not developed by Rocksteady, and people were wondering would a different developer be able to pick that up and keep the momentum going with that series without it feeling stale or, walking the same ground or whatever. And this is knee deep in the time of games where these annual or semi-annual releases of franchise games started to kind of be more popular. The one that comes to mind most frequently to me is like Assassin's Creed, where they have, or Call of Duty, right, where they have multiple studios working on the same franchise, so that they can trade off every other year or whatever. So you get continual releases of games. And so that didn't exactly happen for the Arkham series because we don't get a game every single year or whatever. But yeah, it was an interesting experiment. I was very curious to see how Arkham Origins would do things, and they had some sort of freedom, right? So WB Montreal was able to get the tech and the engine that Rocksteady used for Arkham City. I believe the city layout is the same. It's just it takes place in winter, so you have all the snow and stuff. And of course, it's Arkham Origins. It's a prequel. It gets to explain how you get to Arkham Asylum, and this time they had different voice actors for a lot of the main characters. And that was another thing too, because by then, I had mentioned earlier how I wasn't on board with using the animated series actors for the Arkham game, but then by the time Arkham City came out, it was like second nature, and I was like, I don't know, are they going to be able to keep this in the same universe and feel good, but have different people voicing younger versions of the characters. And I mean, I've talked about this on Twitter too, and Bill Ramey, who runs BOF, like he's long maintained that Arkham Origins is one of the most underrated Batman games that there is, and I definitely agree. So, what did you guys think when this one came out?
I'll go.
Do it.
Good, 'cause I thought that it was it'd be an unpopular opinion, in which I say that I adore this game. I adore Origins.
Mm-hmm.
I love that game so much.
It's high on my list for sure.
This one, as soon as the pre-orders came out, I said, this is it. This is the one that I'm going to get the special version, in which I got that.
Was it the big Joker desk thing?
Yep. I still have it. Yeah. It needs new batteries to still light up, but I loved that thing. And it was a quick fun story. So it was a midnight at GameStop, and I'd called them because I worked today. Yeah, so my whole plan was that I was going to go there at midnight, get it, and then just play it until I couldn't play anymore and go to sleep because I wouldn't have to work the next day. And then a few hours before I got called, I was told I was going to have to get up early and go to work the next day. So it kind of ruined the whole thing, but yet I was still like, I'm going to GameStop to get it. And I showed up at 12:02, and they had people in the store, like workers, but they had their bars up and everything. So I looked like some pathetic little kid just pounding on the glass door, and they're just yelling like, we're closed. And I said, but you've got my Arkham Origins. And they finally opened up the door, and I'm like, what are you guys doing? I'm here at 12:02. And they said, well, there was nobody here. Anyways, I got my whole package. I still went home and played it for
it was just you. You're like, there's no one else that did this, dude.
It doesn't matter. Give me my game. Give me my game. You promised.
Don't you have to work in the morning?
None of your business. I still went home and played it for like 2 hours, and it was torture to have to turn it off and get to sleep. The next day at work was torture, but we can get into specifics on why I adore the game like a little bit later. But Haas, as you'd already said, like the prequel aspect of it, I liked that it was taking place in the winter, so all the snow, just the look and the feel was cool. And to top it all off, it was Christmas in Gotham at night with snow. Like, oh my god!
Yeah. I like stuff like that.
Yeah,
great visuals.
It's so I have such an appeal for Batman Returns. This Batman, I loved his suit. I think his suit is my favorite out of all the Arkham games. He was also like, he was kind of grittier, and I thought a little more visceral and stuff too. Granted, I thought that worked with the game because it was a prequel, so he was still figuring stuff out. So he was a little bit more raw and a little bit more brutal. That worked for me too. The story, I think, is a little more complicated than what they're just trying to sell it on. 8 assassins trying to go for him. I love the score, and especially the highlight of the whole game was a big reveal, which you guys know what I'm talking about. And just everything about a big reveal in that game, I freaking adore it, and I loved it so much.
Yeah, I didn't want to spoil it off the bat. I wanted one of the other guys.
Christopher Drake did the score, and he did a version of Carol of the Bells at that part, and it just sounds so good. Not to mention, I didn't see it coming at all either, and I just thought it was brilliant. Either. That's my gushing for Origins.
I'm really happy that you guys like this one so much.
Garrett.
No. No, I'm not going to ruin it, because this is the one that, as I talk about the Arkham games more generally with friends that aren't necessarily diehard Batman fans, but like these games, it's the one that I hear the most negatives about. Yep. And I just always, I don't get it. And, it doesn't even, always go into the fact that like, oh, we love Rocksteady did an awesome job and this isn't Rocksteady. So, we just aren't gonna like it as much. It's I think there are maybe some areas from like a texturing, artwork standpoint, that the game doesn't look as clean or developed. Kind of blips in and out at a couple spots. Frame rate like kind of slows down here or there, but it is the plot of this game that I think I love so much. And it might be because it is sort of the game that's the least interested in being ham-fisted into being a Arkham or a version of Arkham or a different take of Arkham. It's a Batman game that, while it has Arkham in the title, is a little bit freed from the confines of needing to have an Arkham story to tell. And I think that that's really neat, because it's only one of the 4 core that gets to do that a bit more. Now I'll say, because it was just sort of in Gotham more generally, it seemed awfully sparsely populated with normal citizens. But I think that's probably a limitation of budget at some point too. And these things you have to pay for them to get them made. So I get it.
Well, it's hardware limitations, I think, primarily, because all of the major consoles at this point, and the PS3 and the 360 were running into the end of their life cycles. When Arkham Origins came out, the PS4 and Xbox One were going to be released in less than a month. And the processing power, I don't think it was there. Now, granted, again, with hindsight, Arkham Knight doesn't exactly amp up the general population, but there are a lot more people running around in the city, and I think that's owed to generally beefier hardware.
Sure.
But that was one of the things that just kind of made me nervous. I mean, I remember the game was first announced as definitely coming out in 2013. I think it was in a WB Investors call in February. So we were 8 months away from the release of Arkham Origins.
Yeah, it was just like, oh, really?
Right, yeah. They just kind of dropped this bombshell. At least it was a bombshell to me. And I just kind of remember going, why? Like, do we need to try and turn this into something resembling an annualized franchise? I mean, the artistic pedigree that Rocksteady put forward, It sets such a high bar. And I'm sure that WB Montreal, this is me in February of 13, I'm sure they're great. But really, I'm willing to wait for what they have cooking up next, because I'm pretty sure they're going to do at least one more Batman game. And in hindsight now, looking back on the development, WB Montreal first got their beaks wet with the engine that drives the Arkham games through the Wii U version of Arkham City, which they developed. In fact, the feature in Arkham Origins with the Electrocutioner's gloves, it's basically an adapted version of BAT mode, which was exclusive to the Wii U version of Arkham City. And that's how they familiarized themselves with working in the sort of framework that Rocksteady established. And when Arkham Origins came out, I was in a very different place. I had moved across the country to the Chicago area. I lived here for just a couple of months by the time Arkham Origins came out. And I wasn't on a very huge hype train for this one. But I was still going to get it, at the earliest possible moment. And I remember calling around, new to the area. I don't really know my way around very well at all. And I wasn't able to get in a pre-order of the collector's edition on the Xbox 360, so I'm just calling furiously to a bunch of GameStops to see, A, if they're having a midnight release, and B, if they have any collector's editions. And getting one of those things would have been lucky. Getting both of those things would have been very fortuitous. Thankfully, I got both of those things. So I felt a little better about the game once I realized that I'd be able to bring the collector's edition home. And I do have that Joker statue actually right behind me right now. And it's awesome. They did a really nice job with it. But yeah, Arkham Origins, story-wise, it is just as good, if not maybe a little bit better than the story that was put forward in the first two games. I have no qualms in saying that. The way that it was effectively able to extrapolate backward and become like this earlier story in a timeline that was established by the first two games and still feel like an authentic extension of those games was pretty impressive from a writing perspective. I actually got to interview Roger Craig Smith, who played Batman in this game a couple of weeks before the game came out, and his earnestness really struck me. He seemed really, really excited to be voicing Batman in this game, and he talked in the interview with me about not going to try and mimic Conroy. And that's one of the things that I think kind of struck me as a weird incongruity, because Roger Craig Smith is a relative departure as a voice for Batman when compared to Kevin Conroy. But then they cast Troy Baker as the Joker, who is doing a really effective mimic of Mark Hamill. There's just very different kinds of philosophies that go into the voices for Batman and the Joker for two of the primary characters. But the thing that I think Arkham Origins is missing is developmental polish that Rocksteady always exhibits in their games, at least before you get to the PC version of Arkham Knight. But they outsource that too. But and where it struck me the most, when you're making your way through the Gotham City Police Department, there's an instance where you get into a combat encounter with a bunch of cops in, I think it's a shooting range, and the thing that immediately struck me about that is that, camera is everything in the combat of the Arkham games. You have to be able to have good control of the camera and get a good view of who the most likely enemy is to hit you next so that you can keep your combo going. And it's kind of a minor thing probably, but it still struck me that there were obstructions from the map that were getting in the way of the camera, and it was screwing me up in the combat encounter. Everything else is pretty well okay. I didn't think that the Electrocutioner's gloves were particularly necessary from a gameplay perspective. In fact, they probably made things a little easier than they should have been. But there's just a couple of instances where it doesn't seem like from a developmental perspective, the game is quite as polished as Rocksteady's first two instances in the Arkham games.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It was actually the first Arkham game where I had a game-breaking bug happen. It was towards the end of the game where you have to do something with like frozen glaciers or something and float down like to get across some pipes or something. And for whatever reason, I got in this weird loop where I couldn't make these platforms move the way they were supposed to, and I was just stuck in this glitch, and the game auto-saved, so I had to figure out how to like go back into my saves and hope to God I had saved at an earlier point, and I had to replay like 3 hours of gameplay just to get back to like that spot or something. But you know,
you heard of instances like that.
Yeah,
and those kinds of technical problems, at least to my knowledge, were not present in the first two games.
Yeah, nothing you ever heard of.
Yeah, right. But that being said, I agree with you guys that Arkham Origins is underrated. My perspective on it has only warmed over time because it's such a truthful feeling early years Batman story. I know that there are people who only swear by these kinds of early year solo Batman stories, right? Like that is Batman. You can't have other Batman stories. It has to be solo Batman. He's got to be
You
young.
can have a Joker and a Riddler, but no Robin.
Yeah, right. And as far as like a video game adaptation of that kind of a Batman storytelling philosophy, Arkham Origins is very effective. And I mean, there's a couple of continuity things that kind of bug me that it just like chose not to stay consistent with the other games. Killer Croc, the design of Killer Croc kind of bugged me, and you could say that different. Yeah, the philosophy was clearly a very different one.
Now, I was very impressed how they were able to have a more comic accurate Bane and transition him into the Arkham, what he ends up being in Arkham Asylum.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, they also did a really good job of sort of melding They kind of took some aspects of Dark Knight Rises and melded it with the more comic accurate version of Bane into a character that is awesome. Like Bane Bane has his best turn in these games in Arkham Origins. But it also kind of bugged me though that this is only supposed to be 5 years before Arkham Asylum. Right. And thankfully Arkham Knight fixes that. Like Arkham Knight says, no, that's actually more like 8 years before Arkham Asylum. And that made me feel better about it. But at the time, I was like, there's not enough time has passed. And Batman's voice has totally changed and all this. But
found a second puberty. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Right.
Yeah, it's for Batman.
Bat puberty.
If he wants two, he'll get two.
But also, too, Arkham Origins gave me an opportunity to do something.
What a miserable time of life.
Oh, jeez. Oh, man. But Arkham Origins gave me the opportunity to do something that I've wanted to do ever since the very first time I read Year One, and that's kick the living shit out of Brandon. I've always wanted to kick the crap out of Brandon because he's such a slime ball, and Arkham Origins gave me the opportunity to do that. So as a Batman fan, I'm grateful to Arkham Origins for that. But also, too, I mean, you guys have just talked about what the story does, and as an origin story, and you kind of alluded to it before, but as an origin story for this version of the Joker, Origins is very effective. And
spoilers. They didn't. Yeah, thankfully they didn't spoil that in the marketing too much. I mean, I think we knew that the Joker was in the game or whatever, but we didn't know how. And at the time, I was like, okay, well, I just need to. This keeps coming up. I just need to learn to temper my expectations. I'm always like so skeptical about this stuff, and I love it when it comes out. So I was like, okay, well, they killed the Joker off in Arkham's, in Arkham City, so they're going to do an origin story so they can still have Joker and stuff like that. But I was kind of, so I kind of forgot that it was going to happen. But then the way that they they turn this story where I just thought the Joker was going to be in it to a literal origin story, not just about this version of Batman, but also the first encounter that this Batman has with the Joker. I thought it was just brilliant, and the way that he was incorporated in the story was really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised because, with the studio change thing, I was a bit worried, like, oh man, they're really just trying to crank these things out because they're popular and they're making them a bunch of money. And so they're going to rush this thing and switch studios. I'm nervous it's just going to be, a play for money, a cash grab, and the quality is going to degrade in this series. And then that, turned out not to be the case, and I really, really enjoyed it was produced. But the other thought that I had with the Joker is like, man, they're going back to the well. They did something really brave and really daring and really unexpected, and it was such a big hit. They're saying, okay, well, we need more of the same. We killed the Joker off, but people love this Batman versus Joker in these video games, so we got to do a prequel because we're afraid that we shouldn't have done that thing we just did. But in actuality, it just really told a nice story and, gave an enriching view into that character dynamic getting started in this universe for the first time, where it was worthy of the inclusion as opposed to being pandering in the inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
I think I really liked this version because while much like Batman in this game, he seemed a little bit like darker, a little grittier, almost a little bit more brutal. He didn't seem as playful as Hamill's versions in the first two games. And that was okay, and that was fine by me, especially knowing that this wasn't Hamill. So, and that this is this was before, so I thought it was just effective of like, oh, I can see how this version could turn into the one that we've already seen, but I liked how it was still, to me, it was just a little different too. And I really liked the little flashbacks. Too, right? Yeah, I liked the little flashback origins of him too.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, that's one of the cool things about the way that this story is told is that, Joker's first instinct is to kill Batman. Mm-hmm. And then the very last words that he says in this game is, "This is going to be fun." It's the beginning of that obsession on his side and that desire to get under Batman's skin. And it's exemplified very effectively in this game. And there aren't a lot of, the standout gameplay moments with the Joker. I mean, it's fun doing that crazily intense beatdown at the end.
Yeah, that's what sticks out to me the most.
Yeah. It's absolutely insane. But also, too, like, I don't think that Arkham Origins necessarily has something that's equal to Mr. Freeze in Arkham City, but Firefly on the Bridge might come close. It's a pretty varied encounter, and you have to rinse and repeat a little bit more than you certainly did with Mr. Freeze, but it's also visually spectacular, and it's with a villain who's lesser used, but also potentially just as threatening. And it's a totally other side of the spectrum, right? Freeze versus Heat. And I thought that the stuff with Firefly was actually really, really cool, especially to show off exactly what Montreal was capable of in taking the reins from the franchise. Or for the franchise, I should say.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of like the legacy of that game is like, wow, they were able to pick something up, lose virtually no momentum, and make something that still respects what came before, but still be its own thing. And I mean, it was just, it's the best execution you could hope for something like that. And the DLC was even good. Like, they had a really good DLC campaign with Mr. Freeze that I thought was really cold heart. Yeah, it was really well done. And that wasn't the only thing we got Arkham Origins related. When the game came out, we also had it had its own companion game. It's where that's another reason where it was like, oh, they're doing more just a cash grab stuff. Like, is this too much Arkhamverse stuff at once? And it turned out to be that's not the case. But I still, not a lot of people played this game. It's not as much as Arkham Origins, but it's Arkham Origins Blackgate, and it's a spin-off game.
Real fast, before we jump to Blackgate, did any of you guys play the multiplayer component of Arkham Origins?
A little bit. That's a good. Yeah. Okay. So that was a really just enough to get a taste of it, but I thought that was a really interesting. And that was also another case where it's like they're just trying to shoehorn all these popular game modes into Batman to like capitalize on it. But it was kind of interesting. Too bad it can't really play it anymore. But
actually, so they apparently officially shut down the servers. Still pretty easy to get into a lobby though. And
interesting.
Last time I played it, I think was in 2017, which was supposedly like a year after the lobbies had shut down. Still active, and I think you could still see people on Twitch that are streaming it even.
That's cool. I mean, the whole concept behind that multiplayer mode was pretty interesting if you're into that sort of thing. I'm not the biggest fan or player of multiplayer stuff, but I thought that was really noble effort of them to try, and it was developed by another studio, right? Was it Splash Damage?
Yeah, it was Splash Damage.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, who of course is that's their forte is the multiplayer type games like that, and to be able to make a Batman version of that, I thought was really cool.
Yeah, I mean the fact that
did you play it? I mean, you were asking about it, so I assumed you played some of it.
Yeah, not much, but I played it enough. Like the thing that bothered me, because I was charged with writing a review for Arkham Origins at the time that the game came out for a site I was working for, and no one was touching the multiplayer. So I was like, well, I'm going to touch the damn multiplayer. It seems like someone's got to be able to talk about this, and it's really interesting. I mean, it works. It requires 8 players, and you're randomly assigned to one of the session's 3 different factions. 3 of the players are assigned to the Joker's gang, 3 are assigned to Bane's gang, and the remaining 2 players become Batman and Robin. And a cool design for the Dick Grayson Robin, too, which is one of the reasons why I hope that if Arkham Origins ever gets a sequel, it would be a Robin origin story. But that's kind of beside the point.
They need to do that.
I hope so. That's what my fingers are crossed for. But chances are, obviously, when you get into a lobby, you'll play as one of the gang members, and your main objective is to wipe out the other gang by depleting their reinforcements, by kills or capturing their bases. And the players for Batman and Robin, their job is to stop both sides. And you do that by staying in the shadows, basically, and you try and strike and take people out piecemeal. And if you don't, then the gangs get the opportunity to play as a super OP version of either the Joker himself or Bane himself. And it's a really interesting idea for a multiplayer game. I don't know if it was as effectively executed as it could have been, but the fact that the groundwork was laid for a kind of multiplayer Arkham experience, pretty unique and definitely attention-getting.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it was another worthwhile, worthy thing for them to try, and it, succeeding as much as something like that probably could.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this was also on the Wii U, but did the multiplayer end up on the Wii U version? There's some trivia for you.
I don't know. I actually don't have a Wii U version of Arkham Origins yet. I might actually get one tomorrow because I know of a store that has an unopened copy of it.
Oh man,
for like $7.
Like a retail store?
It's like a secondhand store, but they had for some reason they have a brand new Wii U Arkham Origins, and it's like, well, hey, it might as well, right?
Why not, right?
Yeah,
I should do it. But yeah, let's get into Arkham Origins Blackgate. I think me and Chris are the only ones that have played this out of the panel. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah,
but not the only ones that have it.
That is correct.
Yeah. Has it. So Blackgate was It's one of these games that you hear that's called a Metroidvania type game, which is of course the genre blending between Metroid and Castlevania, but it's gone through the Batman and the Arkhamverse filter again, where your Batman it's a 2.5D kind of game, and you have to go through Blackgate and in non-sequential order and use your gadgets and stuff to kind of get through it, and I think it's gosh, I'm trying to even remember. This is bad. It takes place after Arkham Origins?
A few months after.
A little bit after? A few months after. Okay. Yeah, and yeah, so this was like another, I was again a little skeptical when it came out, but when it did, it was fun. It was Batman through. It was almost like if there had never been full 3D games like what you could imagine some of the 2D Batman games evolving into or whatever. Mm-hmm. So, and that was made by a game. I think the studio was Armature Studio.
Yeah,
that made that one,
mm-hmm.
and which had developers that had worked, on the Metroid Prime games and stuff like that. So there was some pretty seasoned developers, and it came out initially at least for the PlayStation Vita and then Nintendo 3DS, and I had both systems at the time, but I got it for the 3DS, even though I knew that the graphics would be lower resolution. But I got it because I really wanted to play it in 3D, and just the thought of playing a Batman game in 3D just was too much to not experience. So I did that, and it was cool. It was fun. I mean, it's not on the same level as like a crazy like full Arkham game, but it's a fun experience, kind of getting to play Batman like on a handheld system.
Yeah. The thing that I find, even now, that I find still really curious about Arkham Origins Blackgate is that the developers tried to recreate every single thing about the Arkham game experience, but entirely from scratch. So they don't use any existing assets from either the Rocksteady games or from WB Games Montreal. And so art assets look totally different, like Blackgate in Blackgate and Blackgate in Arkham Origins. Like, you would not be able to tell that they're the same place. The prison is pretty moody, but it's got a relatively stagnant color palette, and the environments don't do a whole lot to stand apart from each other. They do in some places, like the administration wing, and at the end of the game you get to the lighthouse, and obviously that looks different. But I actually played it first on the 3DS, and then when I briefly had a Vita, I played it on the Vita. I don't have one anymore. But I think the preferred version was the version that was ported to the Xbox 360 and PS3 and Wii U, the deluxe edition of Arkham Origins Blackgate. Because the environments are significantly more detailed. You could easily see a lot more of the differences between the environments, and models are much clearer resolution to stand up to the scrutiny of HD TVs. And for some reason, I think playing this type of game is a little more natural on a full-size controller when compared to a handheld. The Vita is probably a little bit more comfortable to hold than the 3DS is. But nothing beats a full-size controller, especially when you got paws the size of mine. So, and so it's like a 2.5D game, so it's rendered fully in 3D, but it's played from a two-dimensional perspective, so it's kind of like a platformer. And for my money, I mean, one of my all-time favorite games in anything is Metroid Prime, the first one.
Oh, yeah.
The other two are great too.
It's still the first one though is still so good.
Yeah. I mean, it's for my money, it's one of the greatest games ever made. So the fact that you have even some of the people that were involved in that making a Batman game is extremely encouraging. But where it starts to lose some of the flourish, and when you really start to realize that it's got the Arkham name, but not necessarily the full Arkham feel, is in the combat, because it doesn't play as well as the full console counterpart. I mean, there's a strike button, there's a counter button, there's a stun button, and the jump, sprint, and roll button, which is the same. But in the console version of any of the Arkham games, you can use your stun to affect multiple opponents. And in Blackgate, you can't do that. Your stun affects only one person that's directly in front of you. Even if it looks like they're all clustered in front of you, the stun only works on one enemy. So I was finding myself like getting into kind of the Arkham groove, but getting totally screwed up by the fact that the stun only affects one enemy. And that takes a lot of the power out of the hands of the player, and doesn't really give you the ability to have many long-standing combos with it. But where this game excels is clearly in the exploration because of its genre. It's non-linear. you can choose pretty much any order in which you take each of the enemies down, because each of the sections of the prison are defined by one primary enemy. And each order that you play the game in unlocks different things and different cutscenes as you play the game. The story invokes Amanda Waller and Rick Flag and the Suicide Squad, and Bronze Tiger shows up in it and is kind of at first a boss, but then a potentially unsuspecting ally. And you'll encounter an item in the game world that you can't reach without a specific gadget, so you'll have to go and explore another area before you can get to it, which is a total staple of a Metroid-style game.
Yeah.
And it just feels like it has that kind of depth that you would get. And on the 3DS and the Vita, using your detective mode to scan is much more involved because you're actually dragging your finger across the screen, which is kind of a cool touch. But overall, I think Blackgate is a good game. It kind of tells an origin story of the relationship that this Batman has with Catwoman, which is kind of fun. But tying it to the Arkham games is where it trips up for me, because that brings it to a level of expectation, particularly
at that
on
point.
the combat.
It definitely does. Yeah.
Yeah, it just doesn't quite live up to the title, if that makes sense. What do you think about that, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing is that I knew more about like what this game was as genre wise beforehand, so I knew it was going to be more Metroidvania, more 2.5D. So I already suspected that the combat wouldn't really live up to what you would expect from a full experience in the main console games. Mm-hmm. So I was already kind of figuring that, and that definitely turned out to be true. It's kind of the thing that you have to kind of overcome and kind of slog through. But fortunately, it's not as much of it's definitely not the focus of the game.
True.
For sure. It's almost like you had to have enemies in there to fight just because that's something Batman does. But since it's not the focus of the game and you're not doing it all the time, and most of the time you're exploring the prison and using your gadgets and stuff like that, and detective mode, and then there's bosses in here and there and stuff like that. That stuff kind of stood out is a much bigger part of the game than the regular combat. So that was something I was able to live with just to kind of get through the game. Mm-hmm. But overall, I thought it was definitely a worthwhile thing, although it might not live up to the full console experience that some of the other Arkhamverse games do.
Well, I mean, it has the potential to scratch the itch. Like, if you're looking for a new Batman video game that you haven't played, I mean, it's definitely much more involved because of the non-linearity of it. But if you're open to exploring Blackgate Prison, and what Batman fan isn't, give it a shot.
Yeah, did it come out like the same day as Arkham Origins?
It did.
It came out the same time. Yeah, so that's why. I mean, I got Arkham Origins. I got both games the same day, but of course I played Arkham Origins until I was 100% done. So it was like a couple months later, I think, until I even picked up Blackgate. I'm like, man, I need to play that. And then so it's easy for that one to slip down on people's lists, I think. But it's definitely still worth playing. Mm-hmm. Lauer.
I'll get there.
Bust it out. Play that game.
I mean, if you already got it.
Exactly. I've got it. I just need to sit down and turn it on.
Give it a shot. Who knows? Maybe you'll end up loving it.
Yeah.
I plan on liking it.
Curses over and over.
Mm-hmm. It's not it's not like, oh, I just don't want to play it. It's just, I don't know. I've
got a backlog. Just don't. I understand that one.
Okay.
I have the worst backlog of games ever. Too much to play.
Yep.
But let's move on to the next game, and next to last game we're going to talk about tonight, which is Batman Arkham Knight, the fourth game in the main series. It came out in 2015. 2 years after Arkham Origins, which means that Rocksteady was working on this game for about 4 years. And the story is, after Scarecrow threatens to pollute Gotham City with his fear toxin, Batman turns to his closest allies and has to fight some of his most dangerous enemies, including a mysterious figure called the Arkham Knight, who is in control of the city. And, I guess real quick about Arkham Origins is that that game introduced a bat vehicle playing a major role in the game, which you had the Batwing in Arkham Origins, and that kind of got to take you back and forth to the Batcave here and there in the game, or I don't know if it was the real Batcave or a satellite Batcave. I don't remember.
In Origins?
In Origins.
It was the main Batcave.
It was the main Batcave? Okay, so you did get to, it was fun, again, it was, but it wasn't that kind of like, oh, you actually get to use the vehicle. It was just kind of a transportation, like fast travel kind of thing, and they used it in some cutscenes and things like that, but the big thing about Arkham Knight was, oh, finally, you're just in Gotham, free roaming. It's huge. It's next gen. It's on Xbox One. It's on the PlayStation 4. Like, look at all these effects. Like the graphical fidelity is increased, and the Batmobile, and it's fully playable and stuff. It had been the first time that like that had been tied into an event, any kind of adventure Batman game where it had that much emphasis. Like usually, like we had talked about some of these other games where you would have, like in the Batman Begins game, where you would have a level or two where you're just controlling the Batmobile and it's on rails, or there's some other games like you have the Sega CD Batman Returns where there's some levels where you're controlling the vehicles. It's usually the vehicles get like a side mission or a side level. But Arkham Knight had this promise of, nope, the Batmobile is like in the game and you use it as much as any other tool in Batman's tool belt. So you had that for the gameplay hook on top of everything else in terms of wrapping up the crazy story they had built up with the Joker dying. And we had talked about taglines early on, and for Arkham Knight, like the way it begins is like, this is how it happened. This is the day that Batman died or whatever. And you need to play the game to figure out if that's true or not and how that all resolves. But for my money, it's the best Arkham game. And I wrote a big old giant review for it for BOF when it came out. Just the way that it incorporates so much of the Batman mythos and is a capper for the storyline. And it's one of those things where when I start to ask myself the question of like, if I could only play one of these games, which one would it be and why? Arkham Knight fits the bill just because it has so much in it, and it does so much for the character and for that universe they built, that I think that it's just, for me, it's the best game in the series. But what do you guys think of that one?
It's tough for me because I think there's a lot of stuff in this game that has clearly been enhanced. You talk about like the photorealism to the graphics, and the inclusion of the Batmobile was huge. Something about it has never been fully satisfying for me. And I don't know if it's in the end of the story, and to bring up The Dark Knight Rises, like I don't like Batman stories with real ends. Like maybe that's where it hits for me. But I thought if this is really the last of the Arkham games we ever get, and hopefully it isn't, no matter if that's another prequel game or something else. But the way that it was played, this is really the end of this chapter of this world of Batman. And it just felt like it didn't quite give me everything I'd want in a storyline for that type of game. But the gameplay itself's fantastic. I think you end up fighting maybe a few too many tanks in the Batmobile, but otherwise everything around that I thought was completely engrossing, and you really enjoyed having that aspect of gameplay that wasn't there in the past. So I think technically it's probably the best of the games overall. I don't know if it's my personal favorite or not, though.
I'm okay with that. That makes sense.
I think visually,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Arkham Knight was very. It was a system seller. Like it's the reason that a lot of people bought like a PS4 and stuff. And but I think it's for whatever reason, like you were saying. I think I don't know if it is the at the top of people's lists of the Arkham games. Funnily enough, but I don't know. Just for me, there's just so much in it. When the game came out, it's one of the best looking games like ever made. Still, I think visually it just holds up, and they really went nuts with the DLC, and I still haven't beaten all that dang DLC, but they made so much like story DLC for the game too. That Chris keeps talking about how good it is.
That's okay. You'll get to it.
Which one
This
was
was
that?
also, I thought,
Sometime.
The DLC. Which one is that?
There were some
'Cause I think I
individual
got all
story
of them,
chapters.
and I think I beat all of them, but now I'm.
There were
second-guessing.
individual story chapters where you play as Robin, you play as Nightwing.
Yep.
There was the prequel Batgirl story that was a little bit more fully featured.
I did play that because that was
That's-
like a pre-order bonus
yeah.
that came out like right away.
There was the little DLC where you play as the Red Hood. That's just like a couple of missions.
Okay, then
It's
yeah.
very brief.
Yeah, I've
But
played
then
all
there's
of them.
the addition of the Most Wanted missions that add Rage to the
Those.
mix. It adds Killer Croc to the mix. It adds Freeze to the mix, and Mad Hatter, I believe. It
Yeah.
has those 4 in some pretty substantive additions to the overall gameplay. And once you have that installed, you can play them in pretty much any order you want.
Well, not to mention the Batmobiles as the additions you can buy too. I don't know how many times I've raced as in the
Oh my gosh.
Burton.
The Burton
Yeah,
Batmobile.
that goes through 89 and returns levels. Those are awesome. Here, I thought that I would like the Dark Knight trilogy one more, and actually, I didn't. I love just going through that church bell, like the church racing, and then you're in the sewers where the Penguin's hideout is. Like, oh my god, I love it. But back to that overall game, I thought, like you just said, Haas, of visually stunning. Like the game, it just looked incredible. I was one who I got the PlayStation purely because of Arkham Knight. I tried to hold out, but then I was just a big wuss about it, and I'm like, I can't. I need this. There's a Batman game that exists, and I can't play it. I don't think so. Then to Garrett's credit, also though, the poor. Anybody making an entertainment, they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. So people finally get a Batmobile, and what do people bitch about? A Batmobile. I didn't go to the lengths of like complaining about it. To me, it was just, I definitely felt, oh, I've got to drive in the Batmobile again. Ugh. You know, I had that multiple times where I'm like, I don't really want to have to drive a Batmobile for 5 minutes just to get to the next step. Sometimes. And then, oh, I got to fight more tanks. You know, it a little bit got a little too repetitive for me and too reliant on the Batmobile. I loved driving it though. It was great. Also, this was the only game that I kind of got a little annoyed with the Riddler challenges, and it's the only Arkham game that I've never completed the Riddler challenges. Aside from those, so I just looked up on YouTube. Finally, I cheated and just looked up what the end is and fighting the Riddler, because I know I'm never going to get there.
You know, I'm still on that stupid Catwoman mission where I'm trying to I'm on one of the last Riddler missions, and I'm like having to fight all these robots as Catwoman, and I can't beat it. I still can't beat it.
Get good, noobs.
Oh, can't do it.
But overall, I thought the game was cool. I thought the Scarecrow was cool. He's my sign-in picture, like image for my PlayStation account, because I just think that his costume is awesome.
Nice.
They like changed the costume a little bit more, and the voice
Yeah.
actor was different too. And man, he did such a good job.
The end where I think I forget exactly the setting of it, but it's almost like you're in first person mode, and you're like almost in the dark, and you're turning around and looking, and then like something's just there. I don't know if he's visualizing the Joker or if it's it's been a while since I played it, but I just know that it scared the hell out of me. Man-Bat scared the hell out of me.
Oh yeah.
That was an awesome
And then
moment.
the beginning
sure.
didn't scare the hell out of me. I just thought it was freaking awesome. A great setup for the story. Well, not only this is how Batman died, because as we've talked about earlier, of we're used to as comic book fans of like, yeah, so and so died,
Right.
sure. So then it wasn't like we'll see. But then jumping into the Paul's Diner like setup, I just thought that was awesome. So I mean, the game is awesome. The game's great. Some nitpicks of mine, but overall, I think it's a worthy addition to the Arkham series.
Yeah, I mean, just the way that they, after Joker's dead, but then they were able to keep it under wraps, really impressively, I thought, with how they were able to reveal what they were going to do with the Joker in the game, is that they have him appear almost like as a conscience on Batman's shoulder, because he's, Batman's infected with this same stuff, and it's in his blood. So like that, the Joker's in his head throughout the whole movie. Or throughout the whole game. So as you're playing the game, Joker will be like this little chip on Batman's shoulder, telling him stuff and taunting him and stuff. And that had been a hallmark of all the games. Usually it's the Joker that's in Arkham Asylum, Joker's basically copying Gruntilda from Banjo-Kazooie, where in Banjo-Kazooie you're in Gruntilda's lair, and she just taunts you as you play the game and makes fun of you. And that's basically what Joker does in Arkham Asylum. Is like you walk through the asylum and Joker just comes on.
I just love when he
speakers and starts making fun of Batman.
Oh yeah. Sorry. I was gonna say with this game, I love like sometimes you turn around and it's like you almost do like a camera spin, and all of a sudden he's just there. I just loved that aspect.
Boom, he's
too.
there and he has something to say.
I just thought that was great.
And then you just look around, and then you just look back, and then he's gone. I mean, it's such like Joker's just a figment of your imagination. I mean, it's such a clever way of doing that. And it's one of those things where it can only kind of work in a video game the way that they implemented it.
Yeah.
And of course they had, and I think in that game are probably career best performances from Conroy and Hamill as Batman and Joker. Just for the especially for Conroy, like the sheer amount of dialogue that he has to do in that game is crazy. And the fact that he was able to maintain a very consistent performance throughout the whole game, I was just really, really impressed with it.
Yeah. Arkham Knight. Man, can't believe that it's been 4 years since this game has come out. Mm-hmm. But I remember the announcement very vividly. It was March of 2014. And unlike the last announcement, that it was just kind of dropped willy-nilly at an investors meeting or a stockholders meeting. I saw that first trailer that Blur Studio created, and as soon as I saw Rocksteady, I just lost it. I don't know if I have ever been on a hype train for a video game as potent as it was for me on this one. I was just immediately absorbed with the idea of what it was going to do. The Joker's death has created a power vacuum in Gotham City, and there's a gauntlet of enemies that Batman is going to have to run through, but this is also potentially the end of this Batman story. That sounded extraordinarily intriguing for me. And that's even before you get to the Batmobile. Now, I look back on it, Arkham Knight has the distinction of being, as far as for any critical review I have ever written, I've only ever given one perfect score, and I gave it to Arkham Knight. Oh. And the reasoning that I gave it to Arkham Knight, and I stand by it. If I were re-reviewing this game today, I don't think I would change the score. And I know a lot of people have complained about the Batmobile, but I think I'm kind of in a unique position compared with other video game reviewers, not with you guys, but with other video game reviewers in the sense that I'm an embedded Batman fan. He's my favorite character in fiction. Mm-hmm. So a Batman video game that bats as high as this game does is going to carry extra weight with me, just like it would potentially carry extra weight with you guys.
Yeah.
And every single element of Arkham Knight that's ultimately filtered through into what the final experience is. I know a lot of people complained about the Batmobile, but for those of us who have just been waiting for that one missing element of the definitive Batman experience that the other games had yet to provide, the addition of the Batmobile and its immense implementation over the course of the entire game experience made perfect sense to me as a Batman fan. I never questioned why I was doing what I was doing in the Batmobile over the course of this experience. The only frustrating instance that I personally felt on my first playthrough of the game, I think, was in one of the hideouts where you actually have to crawl up the side of a bunch of walls. I didn't care for that all that much.
Yeah. You're Batman Forever it.
Kinda, yeah, except much slower.
Yeah.
But the combat with the car didn't bug me. And I found the races to be very exhilarating because I knew each time, like if I destroyed the car, I knew I was getting a little better every time. And ultimately, every racing experience that I had with the car, I would prevail in. And that's where I feel like one of the things that Arkham Knight does not get enough credit for is a really well-balanced difficulty curve, where it introduces some pretty difficult things that it expects you to pull off. But if you devote yourself to it, then you can notice yourself getting better at it. And the vision of the Batmobile was also just unique. And the way that it's employed in the story is pretty unique as far as other Batman stories are concerned. So I was just totally enthralled in the way that the game uses the car. But then you get into the other elements that this game culminates from the other games. So combat is the sharpest it has ever been in any of the games in Arkham Knight. It feels like they've struck, they sped it up just a little bit, but it's got enough of a punch and a crunch to it that it's just the combat of Arkham perfected. And adding in other playable characters into single combat encounters, shuffling between
that is so cool.
The dual play mechanic, between Batman and Catwoman, Batman and Robin, Batman and Nightwing. It's also a unique element to this game and made perfect sense for both the story moments featuring those multiple characters, but it also gave really great and rewarding character interactions. One of the things I was waiting to see in an Arkham game up until this point was uniting the original dynamic duo again in these games. And I got it in Arkham Knight. And I love those instances between Batman and Nightwing taking down the Penguin's weapon caches. They're some of my favorites to play when I play this game again. And I think I've played it through like 4 times total now.
Man.
And so that's just another aspect of it that I love. And this is also the game that, Arkham City we talked about before, it created that Arkhamverse filter. But Arkham Knight really does feel like it is doing its own thing with the confidence of a world that it has established for itself. Mm-hmm. So like the creation of a relationship between Tim and Barbara Gordon was a pretty unique aspect, but also, just kind of made sense for what these games were doing and the kinds of stories and characters that it was dealing with. Yeah. Barbara's greater implementation in the story, from being just that voice you heard in the previous games to now actually having a more active role. And at first this game pissed me off because I genuinely thought it killed her off. And then, you realize that it didn't. Everything that revolved around the Knight himself was, I was initially a little bit disappointed because any Batman fan worth his or her salt would be able to see that coming a mile away. It was just really easy to see who the Arkham Knight was. But then, you think about it, the experience of reaching that moment was very rewarding, because, and I mentioned it before, the Harley Quinn's Revenge DLC just started to hint at the idea of Batman having to confront a failure. And then we see arguably Batman's most definitive failure coming back to haunt him in a way that we haven't seen since Jason was brought back in the comics in 2005. And the confrontation of Batman having to relive that failure through the infection in his blood made for some, at least for my money, some really satisfying storytelling moments where he's actually seeing what he thinks is Jason's death taking place.
Oh, yeah.
And, those instances where he's hallucinating the Joker's interactions with Jason, where he's actually kind of brainwashing him. but also, too, the way that it also helped to allow Jason to make a choice for himself to kind of start to realign himself with the virtuous people in Gotham City. I liked that. And I thought that it made sense, especially considering that, Batman did still see him as a son. And once he realized, because he could have just beaten the living hell out of the Arkham Knight and incapacitated him and taken him in. But once Jason made the turn from villainous mastermind to victim in Batman's eyes, Batman's first mode of operation is to save victims. And for my money, that's exactly what he was trying to do with Jason once he got the full picture of everything that was going on. So it's easy for the reveal of the Arkham Knight to overshadow all of that stuff, but that's one of the things that I really do think the Arkham Knight story excels at. And to me, that's even more impressive by the fact that Dini had nothing to do with this story. It was Sefton Hill who was the primary spearhead and who was working in consultation with Jeff Johns and a couple of other people at Rocksteady. And I just think that the story does hit a high that tells a lot, not just about what Batman's journey is, but what his supporting characters are like. And that's before you get to the fact that this is the 6-year culmination of every gameplay element that the game's introduced before coming into its most perfected form. So you have that story that gets to the root of the characters, and you have the sharpest gameplay in the series. That's a perfect game for my estimation.
Boom. See, and that's exactly why I also rated it so highly, just because they were able to bring it all together and do it so masterfully, and kind of fire on all cylinders and bring a game that just had the gameplay, had the story, was still surprising. Like you said, we all saw what the Arkham Knight, we all knew who the Arkham Knight was, but it was how they did it, which was the important part to me, is like, how are they actually going to explain it and that kind of thing. So yeah, I couldn't have been more pleased with Arkham Knight. Just jonesing for the next one.
Well, plus this is also all of a sudden this game, Commissioner Gordon transforms into Bryan Cranston. He looks like they really modeled him after Bryan Cranston, which has always been, sort of a fan cast, dream cast of mine.
Well, and he's voiced by Mike from Breaking Bad.
Oh yeah, that's right. Connections there. Yeah, when he first showed up on screen, I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect.
Yeah, it was good. It was very good.
Well, and the change to the PS4 allowed a lot of that, and details that you didn't know. But I didn't, for some reason, I really like this Gordon, but the Arkham Knight Ivy I didn't like as well. And it's much more beautifully rendered, but from a character design, I just didn't care for it.
Curses!
As much. Fantastic, Lowry.
Good night, everybody.
Long way.
Bye-bye.
Here all week.
So yeah, I mean, Arkham Knight I think is always going to be like a huge high point for me in terms of Batman in video games. But does anybody else have anything to say about Arkham Knight other than the pieces we've already said?
If you haven't played it in 4 years, give it another look and see how it's aged, because I think it's aged pretty well.
I think that's a great way to put it, for sure. Like whether it was too tough, or whether you were tired of the Batmobile stuff, or even if you thought the story was a little whatever. I mean, yeah, I think it's definitely still up there.
And hey, I'll give it credit where it's due. The 2016 Batmobile feels pretty great to drive around in it. It really does.
You mean the BVS Batmobile?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. See, and just one more comment about the design aspects of this Batmobile. The Batmobile in Arkham Knight really does feel like every good element of every Batmobile put into one Batmobile that you can play with.
I do like its design and how anybody that's sitting in the back, it's like they're thrown in a trunk. because that back hatch comes down and it makes me laugh. I'm kind of like, yeah, you're kind of just sitting up in a trunk, but
it's like a roll cage in like a theme park or something.
Yeah, they got the pretty secure.
They got a seatbelt. They're fine.
Like, it's a seatbelt, but it's like a roller coaster.
Yeah.
They got the full, but it's like he just threw Man-Bat in the trunk though. Like when he opened the back compartment, Kirk Langstrom was just laying in there naked. He wasn't in a seat or anything. So I hope you didn't go over too many bumps.
Yeah, it's got like the the tank elements from like the Nolan movies and the Dark Knight Returns, but it's also pretty sleek looking and just the way that it's able to do the lateral movement, which kind of gets explored a little bit in the Nolan movies, really kind of gets crazy with this version of the Batmobile and all the gadgets and stuff that it does. I mean, it's a joy. Once you get past the learning curve, it's just a joy to control, and just the way that it is literally Batman's steed as you play the game. You can like glide, the way you can glide through the city and call on the Batmobile as you're gliding, and then just land into
right
it and land right into the Batmobile and start driving is just, and then launch back out to the air. Like, it's super seamless. They did such a good job of
shoot out like a rail
making
gun.
that cool.
Also, too, if you guys don't know, it's L1 on the PS4 and it's the left bumper on the Xbox One. If you want to call the car to you, but you don't want to automatically get in it, hold down the button, and the car will just come and stop by you. And I found that really helpful when I was engaging a bunch of rioters in the city, because then you can use the car.
You can use the car for the riot stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Does it just come flying to you and you just stand there and then you hold up your thing and you say stop, and then just stop.
Shields up,
and then you turn into a statue.
Shields.
Yeah.
Shields.
That's Tanuki Batman. There you go. All right, so I guess the show's already super long, but I knew it was going to be, but we've still got one more game, and this is another one that I think only
this won't be as long because
played.
only half of us has played this one.
Right.
Yeah, but it's definitely way it's definitely worth including in this list, and of course it is Arkham VR, and as the name implies, it's a virtual reality game. It is developed by Rocksteady. It was kind of an extra project that they did after Arkham Knight, and it's for the VR platforms. I have it on the PlayStation VR, and it's kind of I don't want to spoil too much of it, but it's kind of a prequel to Arkham Knight story wise. And man, I wrote a big review of this for BOF when it came out, and I mean, I just gotta say we just spent all this time praising the heck out of Arkham Knight, but Arkham VR is literally, I've said this in the review, it's one of the best Batman experiences I've ever had in any medium, just because of the way that you really do feel like Batman. I mean, just the way that you can put on the costume, you get lower down into the Batcave, like you feel like you're Batman on a mission, doing detective work and stuff like that. Even without the combat, I mean, there's not really combat in the game, and that's kind of it's just not part of what they did for the story, and it's kind of the limitations of VR, the way that they were doing it. But I don't know, just they used the platform and the VR tech to their advantage and built a game around it, and I don't know, they just were able to capture so much of the Batman feeling in that game. So it's one of my favorite Batman experiences.
Yeah, it gets to the core of, I mean, it's probably one of the more kind of transfixing Batman experiences that I've certainly had since Arkham Asylum. Because when you put the headset on and you're standing in the middle of a really ornate room in Wayne Manor before you talk to Alfred, and then you move the camera and you hit a couple keys on the piano, and you start that descent into the cave, and you're looking all around you, and you're totally immersed in what's going on. I was sold within the first few seconds of when the descent started, before you even started seeing anything. Because, the mist was going down in front of your face, and then the cave started to slowly come into view, and you started to do the suit up, and you looked in the mirror, and who's looking back at you? It's Batman. It is.
Yeah, you're Batman.
You are Batman.
Yeah, you are Batman.
But then, like, I think the thing that really drives it home is just how good it feels to throw a Batarang.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, God, I worked up a hell of a sweat doing just the Batarang target practice that you could do in the cave. You're looking up, you're looking all around you, moving your head with the headset, throwing Batarangs with the PlayStation Move controller and trying to get the targets, and you throw them in really quick succession so that you can get everything in time. And just throwing a Batarang. Just first, the way that it works is, you've got the controller in your hand, and you move it and you pull the trigger, and then you hold the trigger, and you're holding a Batarang. It's just like you pulled it off the utility belt. And like the Arkham games, you can just spam it if you want to and throw a shitload of Batarangs at whatever's in front of you. And, I mean, you can use the grapnel gun. That's not quite as immersive because the camera cuts kind of abruptly to the next staging area that you're put at. But
still, the way that you have to, like, take it out of the utility belt and use it, that's the thing that, like in the main Arkham games on the console, you're playing it, and yeah, it's really immersive and you feel like Batman, but there's something a little different about using the utility belt gadgets in Arkham VR, because for me at least, I'm like totally like reminding myself, I'm Batman, so I have to act more like Batman when I'm taking the grappling gun out. I can't use a grapple gun or a Batarang like Ryan Haas would. I have to be more like Batman and like, pose right and pose good and like try to like do it like nice and just hold it in just the right way and stuff like that. I mean, it's kind of really weird how playing the game in VR makes you feel like you need to behave certain ways to use some of the game objects.
Absolutely. And I mean, the one of the true advantages of the way that the game is structured, it can't really do the combat side of the equation very effectively, because you're effectively standing stationary in the different set pieces to accomplish certain tasks. But what that does really lend itself to is investigation and detective work. And the emphasis on the detective work in this game is phenomenal, because you're taking evidence, you're scanning it in, you're trying to deduce exactly what took place when you arrive at a crime scene. You go into the Batcave and you can do blood tests on the people that are locked up in the movie studio that you'll see in Arkham Knight to make a determination. You can take your own blood sample out of your gauntleted arm and test it to find out that you're infected with something, which is just amazing. And you're doing it all in the full immersion of 360-degree visuals. And I mean, even when you start the game up, you're standing on like the precipice of a building looking out at Gotham City, this beautiful conception of Gotham City, and you look behind you, because you have to turn your head to look behind you, and the bat signal's right behind you. And it's totally taking up your full field of vision. But then, the way that the game starts, too, is it revisits the origin story. So you are in young Bruce Wayne's shoes, and everyone is taller than you because you're only 8 years old. So you look up into the grimy face of Joe Chill, and you see things in his teeth, and he's just like glaring at you. And it's a numbing kind of experience to actually see Batman's origin from that perspective. That is something else. And then, like, even in the Batcave, you can bring up holograms of different enemies, and it's like you're looking the Joker straight in the face. Or you bring up a hologram of Croc, and you're looking up at his eyes, at this hulking mass of crocodile flesh that's in front of you. I mean, it's really hard to emphasize just how immersive the Arkham VR experience is unless you've lived it. The story's probably worth absorbing, like in a YouTube video or something, but the story is just kind of a secondary component to the immersion element. And if you're a Batman fan, the immersion element is more than worth the price of admission. And the price of admission is like a third of the price of a regular game now.
Yeah, but you have to
right, which is not an insignificant.
It's like it's a $10 or $15 game, but you'd have to get the spend a couple $100 for the VR. But I'm telling, I bought a PSVR just so I could play Arkham VR, and that's the kind of crazy Batman fan I am. But
See,
it was totally worth it.
It almost took me there. Almost.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't quite.
Took a couple games.
It took two things. So I roll over backwards for two things in my life: Batman and Star Trek. And as soon,
okay. It was Bridge Crew.
As soon as they announced Star Trek Bridge Crew, I was like, well, shit. I guess I'm getting a VR.
I got to purchase it by future.
So that's critical mass of like reasons to get something. Yeah, for sure.
No kidding.
So definitely, I mean, if you don't have the means or the drive to go and get a VR set up, you can definitely watch some YouTube videos, but I'm telling it, they won't hold a candle to actually playing it with VR, because it's a completely different experience. Just, on paper, you just stand in Wayne Manor and you lower down into the Batcave. That sounds pretty basic, but just the simple act of doing that in the game is so ridiculously immersive. It's really hard to describe how awesome it is, but it's one of those things is like, you've seen Batman do it 1,000 times in comics and in games and in the movies and stuff, but getting to like be Batman and have that experience for yourself is, as a Batman fan, a lifelong Batman fan, there's nothing else that's like it. So,
you won't experience it to that level up until the point that Universal Studios gets the Batman license effect. Basically, I mean, that's what it will take to equal what you can do in Arkham Knight.
Yeah. And that's not hyperbolic at all. Like Arkham VR, I mean, just the way, and part of that has helped too, because by the time Arkham VR came out, you've had all this other Arkhamverse stuff that's out, so you're already kind of attuned to this version of Batman, and the way that the Arkham series presents things. So it's really easy to kind of jump in and be like, okay, your expectations are already set at a certain level. And Arkham VR is able to exploit that to its advantage, and it does a great job with it. So, and it's a short game, like it's a short experience. My dad has actually played through the whole thing, and he loves it. Like it's like he can't stop talking about it. He's not a gamer or anything, but he loved being able just to experience Arkham VR. I mean, because it's just, there's not many things like it. So,
absolutely.
Well,
absolutely. So,
sounds like something I need to put on my to-do list.
Yeah, it's totally worth it. Like, get a friend, find somebody that has PSVR.
Well, I wonder.
Come visit me.
Yep. I wonder.
We'll play it.
If Google Daydream becomes compatible with Stadia, if they're going to start introducing some of the VR games, because that would be kind of a cost-effective way to potentially play it. But now we're getting into like super in-depth gamer territory.
Yeah. I mean, it could happen, but all you need to know right now is like, yes, play Arkham. If you're a huge Batman fan and you played the other games and you hadn't taken the leap to VR, it's absolutely worth checking out, or being able, or finding somebody that has a PSVR and borrowing it or something just to play it, because it's totally worth it.
Definitely.
But I guess we should do some wrap-up thoughts on the whole Arkhamverse. I mean, it's definitely, one of the most complex and sophisticated interpretations of Batman there is. It's kind of crazy to think that 10 years ago, none of this existed, and I can't believe that, Batman is such a malleable character that he's able to weather all of these different forms and iterations. And it's crazy to think that this another pillar of the character was created, 10 years ago, and it's been able to spawn all of these games and all these experiences and comic books and stuff, and be just as strong as any other part of the character. And it's a very important part of being a Batman fan, is being able to experience Batman this way, and it's really great. It's a really great thing. I hold the Arkham series right up there with other great interpretations from the comics, or like the Nolan trilogy, just because of the way it has such a reverence for the characters, but also because it's able to kind of give you an experience with the character that you love that, other forms of media can't match.
I'd say I'm waiting for Batman to drop an incredible music album, because then he would have conquered like every medium that is available. Because
you got the Prince, you got the Prince album.
Well, you need Batman to sing. So
you gotta get the soundtrack for the '66 show where
Miranda,
the Riddler.
Oh, it's a little too late for that one, but
no, I think you put it just because, as we were saying, because he had Batmania on TV in the 60s. He had Batmania on film, arguably twice. One in '89, the other in 2008. The cartoon show, that was a monster hit, and then entered, comics, you could argue with Dark Knight Returns in year one. And then now with, like, video games with Arkham, it's just kind of like Batman, I don't know, has any other hero done, like, had accomplished that much and created so many different, like, universes that all are true to character. And I think you put it well in saying, like, 10 years ago, like, from right now, none of this existed with the Arkham stuff. And that's just kind of a crazy thought to look back on.
Yeah.
I'll add once I get to the Blackgate game, but as of, like, right now, the 4 Arkham games I've played, I love them all. I think that they're all great. If we're to rank them, I don't know. It could change tomorrow because they're just very interchangeable. And it's just, I don't know whoever spawned the idea to get this, the initial idea to get this, the very first Arkham game going. But I'm, you know what? Good for them. That's it. Yeah.
The end.
For me, I don't have a lot more to add, but it is incredible to your point that 10 years ago this didn't exist. It's incredible that we feel that way. That, as I said earlier, that these licensed video games, they almost never add anything back to the larger understanding or perception or identity that the public holds for these characters. And this game series managed to do that. Like this version of Batman stands alongside, equally with, Nolan's Batman or the animated series Batman or the 66 Batman, if not in total public recognition and understanding, but in distinct and authentic feeling takes on the character. So, I mean, from a video game standpoint, it is, the PS4 was I bought that on the back of Arkham Knight. I was one of those people. It's a crowning achievement, in video games in general, and it's really pretty spectacular to see. If you think about, what was going on with games at the time and how many games tried to do or capture some of the magic that this game has had since then, it changed the industry too.
Yeah, I think I said it before and I'll say it again. The Arkham version of Batman and these stories are my favorite non-comics version of Batman. It trumps the animated series. It trumps any of the movies. And the chief element that the Arkham games have as an advantage over everything else is the interactivity. It comes with this truthful vision of Batman, of the world, of the characters, but it puts you in control. And it makes you feel powerful while it puts you in control. And that aspect is just something that can't be replicated in another medium. And the fact that we've gotten as many good games as we have, because all of the Arkham games are good to varying degrees. I don't think that anyone can say that that any of them are bad games, at least not if you bring up the mobile games. But No, these games are phenomenal Batman experiences. They're adaptive philosophies and what they take from what's come before. It hits just the right note while also standing apart as unique extensions of the Batman character and the kinds of stories that you can tell with him. And they also all just take advantage of the fact that they are video games. So the fact that you can combine all of those things, world-class talent that puts these together, recognizable voice talent that gives it a tinge of familiarity on top of the fact that it's a property that we're familiar with, and just an A game in every instance to represent the world that we love so much and the character that we love so much. I just don't think that when it comes to the adaptations of the character that you get any better than the Arkham games.
Yeah, and I'm really hoping that Arkham VR and Arkham Knight is not going to be the last time we ever see anything related to the Arkhamverse. I kind of expect that that's not the case. I expect that, Warner Brothers isn't going to let that happen, even if Rocksteady, who knows what Rocksteady's doing? I'm still waiting. Every year, it's when E3 rolls around, it's okay, is Rocksteady going to announce anything? And then they come on Twitter and they're like, not this year. And we're it's been so long. What are you guys doing? It's crazy. But I get it. Games take, I know, guys. Games take a long time to make.
Well, it's amazing when you consider that, by now we're going to have waited much longer to even get an idea of what they're up to.
Of what they're even doing. It's really crazy.
Yeah, compared with the wait between Arkham City and the announcement of Arkham Knight. We're in it for the long haul, gents.
Yeah, we're in the dark ages again. Yeah, I almost just thought that and that's we don't even know what WB Montreal's working on. I thought we would get another game from another developer to hold us over, but
the A and B teams are busy. There. We need a new C team at least. I mean, come on, guys, what the hell's going on? Take your time. Yeah, take your time. We want it to be good.
Yeah. So, what else can we say? The Arkhamverse is awesome. We just spent 3 hours talking about how awesome it is. So if it's something that, if you're not a gamer, go out and watch some YouTube videos at least, or, rent a game. Even if some of these games launched on older consoles like the 360 and the PS3, but there's the Return to Arkham collection that's out right now, which has Arkham Asylum and Arkham City remastered for current consoles. So that's something you can pick up and jump into the universe if you haven't done it. So I would definitely recommend it.
Rank them.
Rank them. Yeah. Me rank
of the core four, or maybe you and
of the
Clow
core
can,
four
can definitely put in the other two if you want.
Okay, I'll do a quick ranking. I'll just throw them all in. Let's see if I can remember them. Okay, I'll do Arkham Knight
first. Oh my gosh, last or last?
I might even. I'll do last to first. Okay, so I'll put Arkham Origins Blackgate last. That's kind of they're easy to do, but it's not representative.
I was going to say, well, then apparently I don't need to play
I like
it.
No, it's good, but which one, it's a ranking, favorites and all that. So Blackgate at the bottom, then probably Arkham Asylum 1, then Arkham City, then Arkham Origins, then Arkham Knight, and maybe even Arkham VR at the top. And that's kind of weird, but I just can't discount the experience level that Arkham VR will give you as a Batman fan. Arkham Knight's really, really close though.
Night City Asylum Origins for the core four.
City Asylum Origins, and that's your last to first or first to last?
Night City Asylum.
That's first to last.
Oh, first to last. Okay.
Yeah, for the core four. VR, I agree with Ryan. I mean, it's a unique experience, so it's definitely near the upper echelon, but I don't think I can place it in with the core games. And then Blackgate is fun.
Yeah, it feels weird for me to do that.
Yeah, right. But and Blackgate is fun, but it's just kind of its own thing.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time ranking in my head. I think it probably, and they're so tightly clustered together that like getting to of the core four to put something in fourth, it's like, oh, you didn't even make the medal stand. But I mean, that's not representative of just how great every single one of these games are. I'd probably say, City, Night, Asylum, Origins.
First to last?
Yep, first to last.
All right, well, I'm going to mess it up, and I'm going to say from last to first.
You would.
Night, Asylum, Origins, City. All of ours are different.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that just speaks to how each of the games speaks to you differently depending on your Batman tastes. Like, it's really crazy. You know, they all like have different voices and different gameplay mechanics and slightly different ways of approaching the story or what it's saying about Batman with each one. And that's what you want out of it.
Because even though I would put, like, for me, City is number one, I've played that the least out of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think it's just because I could turn on Asylum, much like last night, I turned on Asylum and I just played a half hour. And I'm like, with City, I'm like, no, I need to sit aside 3 hours because I can't just do a really quick, turn it on and play something. So that's just like an example. Or Arkham Knight I'll put on and I'll do one of like the Batmobile racing levels or something. And City is just like, no, I need to strap in.
I think that's why I still haven't played the DLC in Arkham Knight. I'm like, I need to sit down and really do it,
dedicate some time.
But then there's 10,000 other games I need to catch up on too. But what are you gonna do? Hopefully, I'll finish the Arkham Knight DLC before the next Arkham game comes out. We're still waiting.
Get some time.
We're still waiting, so I got some time. I guess that's about it. Play the Arkham. Do it.
You're gonna like it.
I guarantee.
Yeah. Well, let's start wrapping up the show. Let's do some plugs here. Lauer,
hey, I'd love to. I am on the Twitter at Lauer_Ryan. Lauer spelled like lower. And let's see, for BOF, the last thing that I put on was the latest Batman Batman TMNT issue number 3 of the latest series. Before that was the conclusion to Batman Damned. And what would be coming up? Oh, coming up would be the next issue 2 of the Batman Last Night on Earth. The Snyder Capullo next issue.
Nice.
So that comes out the last Wednesday of this month. So there you go.
Cool. What do you got going on, Garrett?
So I am continuing to review the Justice League run over at the website, and just super excited to see where this story continues to go. I've said it several times. My reviews, I'll say it. I think the series has been fantastic as of late, particularly in the last, call it 7 issues or so. So new issue will be up. Review will be up on Wednesday for New Comic Book Day next week. You can follow me at Twitter, on Twitter at GarretWato. It's Garrett WATO, and you're going to get a lot of fantasy football stuff with me if you follow right now. I always throw that in there because I sort of live in 2 worlds between fantasy football and superheroes, and I get follows from each world, and then a lot of times it's pretty sweet because, like, you know, I'll have somebody be like, follow me for fantasy football, and all of a sudden like, dude, wait a minute, you like Batman too? And then it'll kind of be a nice little, you know, connective piece. But I think that's probably the rarity. The thing that's most likely is people going, man, I had no idea I was going to see this much He-Man stuff in my timeline following this dude for his hot Viking sticks or something.
I can only imagine that the comic crowd, you'll put out something about, you know, like Patrick Mahomes, and be like, which comic is this guy in? Who is this? Who's this new character? And vice versa.
Who's he writing? Right, exactly.
Cool. Chris, what do you got?
You can find me on Twitter at Chris Clow, ChrisClow. Currently working on my next issue of Comics on Consoles dedicated to 1994's The Death and Return of Superman that was on the Super NES and the Sega Genesis. Other than that, you can hear me on Discovery Debrief, a Star Trek podcast. We haven't recorded in a while, but that's just because Season 2 of Discovery is off the air. But Star Trek is going to have a pretty big presence at Comic-Con next week. And we've got Star Trek Picard to look forward to later this week. The return of Jean-Luc Picard for the first time since 2002. And we're pretty excited for it.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to Picard. Hopefully it's going to be what fans want and something new at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see what they do with it.
Really interesting implications that even tie in events of the 2009 movie. So
I love it when they do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
When they can incorporate all of the continuity and still make something cool.
Oh, yeah. Only in Star Trek.
So good.
I mean, it gets into some pretty crazy territory. Oh, and also you can find me at buychriscloud.com, which is my website, and I have a review over there, non-spoilerish, for Spider-Man Far From Home.
Nice. Well, you can follow me on Twitter at SMB_Ryan. And of course, you can follow the Batman Podcast Network on Twitter at BatPodNetwork. And last thing I wrote for BOF, of course, was my big old review about the 4K Blu-rays of the Burton Schumacher Batman movies. They're all great. If you love those movies, you should go get it and read my review. So do that. So I guess that wraps up today's episode. For Chris, Garrett, and Ryan, I'm Ryan. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Hey now! You've been listening to the Batman on Film podcast, a proud member and the sponsor of the Batman Podcast Network, BatmanPodcastNetwork.com. You can listen to the BOF podcast on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, TuneIn, and wherever good podcasts like this one can be found. Want to advertise on the BOF podcast? Go to advertisecast.com/the Batman on Film Con podcast. Follow Jet on Twitter at Batman on Film and on BOF's Facebook fan page at facebook.com/jet.batmanonfilm. Email Jet via jet@batman-on-film.com. I'm announcer Rachel. Thanks for listening.